Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to another edition to Faith Unaltered. I'm your host, David Russell, and I'm here with Money Metal Glale Glover. What's up, brother?
Hey, Heretic, how's it going?
I'm
How are you, David?
good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I just came off overall really great show on as a tribute celebrating the life and legacy of Barry Schwartz. That it was also filmed on the Faith Unaltered podcast for people as well, and yeah, it went really great. I mean, we had people ranging from Gary Habermas to Joe Marino to you know, you name it, Guy Powell, they were all there. So all the greats, and they were sharing
Wow.
such great memories of the great man, Barry Schwartz.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. How long did it last? I didn't get to see it today. I was off doing a lot of different things today.
I think, yeah, it was about maybe 2 hours, 15 minutes.
Wow.
It wasn't as long as I was thinking it would be, but yeah.
So how did the did everybody like the intro, the video you did for him?
I think so. That everyone that I showed it to in advance, which was just a couple people, said, yeah, it was really great, really beautiful, and moving. So, and
Awesome.
I assume everyone else there enjoyed it as well.
Awesome, awesome. So, what highlights did you actually highlight upon the shroud?
Highlight upon the shroud.
Yeah, like did you get to talk any about the shroud and his work and stuff like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
we had an actual fellow STIRT member, Dr. Ken Stevenson, on. So he was a member of STIRT back in 1978, and he was actually the co-author with Dr. Gary Habermas for his book on the shroud back then. So yeah, we were getting
Yeah.
great insights into STIRP and kind of the inner workings, how that was. Obviously, we had Gary Habermas on as well, somebody who's worked with Barry from a theological perspective and trying to go with Barry and talk about the resurrection. We had Michael Kowalski, who's the head of the BSTS newsletter. So yeah, we another one that's really important for Barry. We had Arif Khan on the show, and he's one of the higher ups of the Ahmadiyya Muslim movement in the United Kingdom. Like, he's connected with like the Caliph, which is kind of like their pope. And they in 2010 they officially accepted the shroud as authentic, and they
Wow.
invited Barry and others to come to speak. So Barry gave his famous line like, here I am, a Jew, talking about the most famous Christian relic to a bunch of Muslims, and he just thought that was great. That like we could be the shroud could unify so many people, and that God was using his knowledge of the shroud to share God's truth with people.
That's amazing. And for the audience, if you don't know, Dale is big into the shroud. This is one of his things. He's had shroud wars all across the world with people literally through podcasts and stuff like that. He's argued for the authenticity of the crowd. And just real quick, I mean, what do you think is the most singular, I would guess, the most specific line of evidence that proves the shroud authentic?
Well, I guess in order to answer that, I have to ask authentic in which sense? Like,
That it's the shroud of Jesus Christ. What would make you draw that conclusion?
it's kind of a combination of things, I would say. But if I had to give it in one line, I think that Dr. Robert Buckland, he was a famous scientist, medical forensic pathologist who studied the shroud and said, and he concluded it belonged to Jesus. He's actually the guy that the show Quincy, medical expert back in the
Mhm.
1970s, the famous TV show, that was based on this guy. And he said, look, based on the evidence of what we can tell, the shroud man went through in terms of listing off his injuries, the historical evidence pertaining to the historical context. The forensic pathologist is reasonable to conclude that this person, there's only one person in human history who's undergone this sequence of provable events, and that person is Jesus Christ. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, if I had to sum it up as one sentence, I think it's the context there that
Yeah.
yeah, even as a forensic pathologist in his professional capacity, he said it's reasonable to conclude this covered Jesus Christ.
Wow, that's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to stay on the shroud, but I mean, that's probably fresh in your mind. But how's your week been otherwise, man?
Well, otherwise, so another great thing that's going really well, and you're gonna hate me because again, it's on the shroud, but slightly different is I'm teaching my Bible study at an actual church, and I'm actually getting paid to do it. So like this is an official teaching job, and I did my third study, and it's on Real Seekers for free. I post up the recordings, but it's going great. You know, this church, Oakwood Wesleyan Church, they're really great. They're into apologetics. They're inquisitive. They ask great questions and stuff like that. So I mean, it's just a pleasure being an official teacher in a church and stuff like that, and it's going great.
That's amazing, man. We need more apologetics, and we need more people that will speak against the onslaught of political correctness and um, views that come across the, I guess, the public square, so to speak. That's one of my main focuses was, cultural apologetics is, you know, we've got to be able to engage the culture. And I think it's so important, but you're actually living that right now. You're living that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
You're
yeah,
equipping the church. My famous saying's always been to engage some and equip some because we got to do both.
yeah. And one thing that feels great is like a bunch of these people. First of all, a bunch of them knew nothing about the topic, but the ones that did, including the pastures, his name's Sully Prince, and he's a great guy. He has a podcast called the Third Degree Truth Hurts podcast. And I think he's about the same size as Faith Unaltered there, but he's got great videos and stuff. But he was actually skeptical of the shroud. And through my teachings, you can even hear it on the recording. He's like, "You've convinced me. Like that, I believe this is real." And he's hungry for more evidence and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we know that you're kind of a minor on this scale and shouldn't be taken seriously because we know the shroud is fake. But I mean,
oh, is this officially David Russell? What's the name of
no,
the
man, you're great, dude. I've loved all your presentations. I even like jumped into that Wesleyan, the first one you did, and the some of the things you were saying was even like, wow, it kind of blew me away that there's just so much to it.
Absolutely.
And it's something that I haven't been able to dive into that much, but I think that with what you're doing is you're producing a tangible amount of evidence that is worthy of consideration in adding to the plethora of arguments that proves Christianity is true and a viable option to life and to faith and to God. That this is, it's true.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's at least four good arguments for Christianity specifically. So,
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's the shroud, which we've been talking about,
Hmm.
scientific evidence for the resurrection. Of
Oh
course,
yeah.
there's, David Russell is well familiar with this, but Gary Habermas's minimal facts approach, the historical
Hmm.
evidence for the resurrection, is another great
Yeah.
argument. I think my circumstantial argument from messianic prophecies can establish the truth of Christianity as well.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I have my vindication prediction argument. So,
I think the preservation of scriptures also, and some of the other historical arguments for Christ, I think for me solidify my faith because I was a big student of history growing up. And if I want to reject something like the New Testament, then I have to reject everything I've learned from history. I can't do that, honestly. I can't. Christianity is true based off of some of those historical evidences, and I'm sorry, but they're overwhelming in comparison to other historical documents and so forth.
absolutely.
Superior.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, when it comes to the preservation of the text, the evidence is just unprecedented in terms of establishing the proper preservation of the Christian New
Yeah.
Testament and stuff like that.
One of the guys that one of the guys that we've often frequented uh, in other venues has, well, we know this, we know that, And it's like, dude,
That
if you
guy's
just
familiar.
look, yeah, if you just look, you know, especially when it came to the supernatural, we know this is not supernatural because of this or because of that, you know, but like the preservation of the scriptures, when you're stepping outside of that box and looking in, you can see clear evidence of the supernatural and the preservation of those scriptures. There is no way out of everything that went on during our history as a human species, that everything that went on, the fact that those scriptures were preserved the way they were, how they were, blows my mind. It's not for me, it's not a feat that's humanly possible on any given day. I mean, this took more than just humanity's work. It took also a supernatural work.
Interesting. Yeah,
Just my opinion.
yeah. I don't want to take away from it, but okay, I'll say this: that is something I considered, right? Not just
Mhm.
for Christianity too, because Muslims make the same claim with the preservation of the Quran. So I think it is a valid argument that you need to look into. And
Yeah, absolutely. And my thing with though, even with Islam, you know, I see where their argument falls apart, but I can't poke a hole in where Christianity's fallen apart without you know. Okay, so I think I have a hole, right? I have a justification for being a doubter, right, or justification for totally taking this into consideration and just kind of tossing it aside, and then I hear contrary evidence saying no, it's because this and this, and
mm,
I don't see that from other faiths and other religions. I see that apologetically through the Christian faith. And I'm like, well, that actually makes sense in the light of this, and this. And I think people oftentimes look at one area and they hone on that one area and they don't consider all the options that are around it that may explain what's going on in that specific area.
yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree with that and everything like that. Yeah, I guess I'll just ask one thing if you
Yeah.
don't mind, as coming at it from a skeptic's perspective, like that skeptic you were mentioning before, they might come up with like a very simplistic objection and say, "There's nothing supernatural. I can't do the accent like you. There's nothing supernatural about the
Come
Bible's
on, Dale, you can
preservation.
do it. We love it.
If the Bible was supernaturally preserved, then we would have this photocopier model of preservation. So a lot of atheists, they kind of have this expectation that if the text's supernaturally preserved, then it'll be preserved like a photocopy. Now you're a scholar. Like what do you make of that kind of expectation on the skeptic's part?
Hold on. GU, I don't think you missed the controversy. We're just kind of rambling about like some things that like really kind of solidify our faith before we get into some of the topics tonight. But yeah, as far as you're concerned, Dale, your specific question was you'd see a photocopy. What does a photocopy look like of the Bible at that point? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how it would look. I know how it does look, and I know that it conforms to not only a aspect of humanity that or let's say an aspect of history of a real tangible thing that was in history that was placed in history and then throughout the years was preserved in a way that is not only um, um, beyond human ability to preserve that way, but also reflects the boundaries in which God laid it in. So I wouldn't expect it to look like this perfect original document that was preserved, like the papyrus would be preserved in this pristine condition, that it was given some sort of supernatural stamp that is undeniably supernatural. No, I think it would look like it's part of this world, part of this reality that it has undergone. Parts are is subject to decay, and parts of this reality, but is preserved in the same way that this reality is bounded in. So like it has to undergo like papyri doesn't last, right? So it would have to be copied over, right? And then we're able to look at all the different copies and being able to uh, point back to that original manuscript and say, hey, look, this is really, really good evidence. So it exists within the bounds of what God has set forth as far as giving us those laws that are unchanging, right?
Yep.
But the preservation of it through, those natural bounds is supernatural because it's all collected and preserved in various different ways, and it all is the same.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You see, I hope that explains it well. Maybe I'm not coming off as well articulate as I'd like, but I when I look at it like that, I see it subject to the idea and the process of reality, but I see that God through that reality is able to work
So
that preservation.
yeah, I understand totally what you're saying. You're making sense and stuff. Obviously, you have to get, you're a heretic, so you don't state it properly, but you're basically giving the James White textual tenacity argument there,
Yeah,
right? And yeah, I think you kind of stated it well.
right on, right on. Well, I hope that answers your question as we move on to our next topic, which I want to talk about because, guys, at Faith Unaltered, again, we don't get into politics that much. We don't try to endorse, and we won't today. I'm not going to endorse a specific
I will
political
Trump.
appointment.
I have
Well,
no
good for you, Dale.
I have no problem
I
endorsing.
don't endorse, I don't endorse that way, right? I support whoever I support when it comes to election time. I keep up with it and stuff like that. But we just had in America a recent assassination attempt that I do want to talk about.
Hmm.
And this has been a wild week, not only for our country, but for, um, uh, you know, the world, even.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big deal. The national, the whole, or the international uh, world looks to the United States in many different ways, whether it's for support or whether it's for, who's going to be next in line to be the president. They look at our economy. Our economy affects the rest of the world. All sorts of stuff go into this. And I'm not saying this to toot our own horn, but I'm saying this because, a lot of the eyes of the world are watching. And what we saw last Saturday, I believe, was a despicable crime against humanity where a person can't stomach rhetoric, which is something we fought to protect, something that all human beings should be able to voice their opinions, whether they're controversial or not. It doesn't give you the right to harm a person because of their views. Their actions, if they're taking place, and those views that they support become actions, yes, stand up against them. But the minute you start, trying to assassinate somebody for their speech, I have a problem with. What do you think, Dale?
Yeah, so in the first place, I totally agree in terms of implications, not just for America but for the world. I mean, we're just a week and a half ago or something like that. Canada was going through another scandal with Jason Trudeau. You know, basically they got caught kind of putting in this serious study as to what would be the implications for Canada when there's a civil war in America, and how would Canada respond. And they were dumping tax money into this as a serious project because I mean, obviously we're your next door neighbors, so that it's going to have huge impacts on us, and it's the same for the rest of the world. Just because you guys are, the kind of the American dollar is what rules the economy of the world and stuff like that, right? So anything you guys do has impacts on everyone. And sorry, what was your question? The main point you wanted me to ask about?
Well, I was asking about what do you think about the assassination attempt
Oh,
and free speech and stuff like that?
yeah. So I'm so in terms of the assassination attempt, obviously I'm no secret. I'm a huge Trump supporter, so I'm just disgusted by it, just out of sheer bias. But beyond that, I'm just disgusted by anyone trying to assassinate someone simply because they have political policies or something that they dislike. You know, yeah, I think it's so. Look, I want to be on it. There are times where I do think it is appropriate to assassinate a political leader. So I've done thought experiments, and this is from Pierce Morgan, so I don't think we will get canceled by YouTube or anything. But like, if it's true that your leader is literally Hitler, like not as a rhetorical point, but he's literally Hitler or Joseph Stalin, you're darn tootin'. I support killing that leader. I would support any assassin getting rid of them.
You just want to kill somebody.
No, he's
I
killing
agree.
millions of people. Like
Yeah.
the edifying and loving thing to do is to prevent that evil from going on in the future. But that doesn't apply to things like Joe Biden. Joe Biden, as much as I hate it, he's not literally Stalin. He's not killing millions of people.
Right.
There's no immediate.
He's just somebody you strongly disagree with. Politically, you just strongly disagree with his policies. You strongly disagree with how he runs a government. Yeah, absolutely. But that's not reason to assassinate him, because he's not in that way. Even though he may support things that will bring about a tyranny that in the future, he's not, he's balanced enough that he's not actually committing these crimes, these horrendous crimes against humanity like Stalin or Hitler did.
And
I agree.
With Trump, he's not literally Hitler. He doesn't have a Holocaust and stuff like this. So I think we do need to get real and realize when we're using rhetorical exaggerations that it isn't literal. And unfortunately, some of these psychopaths take this rhetoric literally, and they make this false equation in their heads and stuff like that, and that's totally wrong. So yeah, like I'm totally against this person, what they did to Trump. I was disgusted by it, and I largely think the left, labeling Trump Hitler and all this stuff and saying he's a dictator and democracy, you have blood on your hands right now from Trump's ear. You literally someone died.
Absolutely. And there was a poor firefighter that protecting his family that got hit. I mean, this is real life, guys. I mean, people are shooting at people over their political ideals, over their free speech. I mean, this is what we fought against. This is this is a First Amendment issue. Now, I'm a big supporter. Look, I know there's been a lot of controversy when it comes to Christian nationalism and the evangelical right and this and that. But you know what? Some of those core values that are produced, such as your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, those are very real. And maybe they contribute to the negative side of that. But overall, I mean, we have the ability to do that because we have a First Amendment. We have a set of rights that the government is not to infringe on. Call that unique to America. Fine. Maybe you don't want to call that unique to America. Maybe they're ideas that were embedded and just didn't catch on other places, but caught on here. Whatever you want to say, I don't care. But the fact is that it gives us the ability to have a freedom to disagree with you. And we have the ability to disagree with each other. And you know what? Our side's not going to always win. I'm sorry. My side doesn't win all the time. If my side won all the time, there would be a conservative in office. I am a conservative. Why? Because I believe in my Constitution. I am a patriot Christian. Yes, I am. That I will declare. I do believe in the Constitution because I believe our Constitution was heavily based off of an ideal that comes from a Christian worldview. And I'm not saying that America was a Christian nation in that aspect, okay? But it does reflect the will of those that were Christian. Even if you read the dossiers of our founders, their journals, their diaries, you'll see that many of them said without the Bible, this Constitution won't stand, or without virtuous people and churchgoers, these principles won't stand up. Why? Because they knew the root of it. And if you listen to people like Larry Arnn, he even goes into in his Constitution classes who is the president at Hillsdale College.
Hmm.
He goes into how it was kind of supposed to reflect the Christian worldview in the very structure. Like it's supposed to be, and I can't remember exactly how he put it, but he said it's supposed to be lower, or lower to God around to where the angels are, but reflective of of Christ's teachings, and things like that. So it's supposed to reflect a divine way of government versus a purely secular. But that's not in effect to say, hey, look, it's supposed to be just Christian. No, it gives the freedom to allow the individual to express the religion of his choice. And certain groups and communities to express the collective religion in where they live, not to be hindered by the one person that comes in and tries to say, oh, well, you can't practice this, you can't put your stuff in the public. It's supposed to reflect a community that shares a common belief. What do you think, Dale?
Wow. So yeah, you gave a lot of stuff. So I'm going to start with what you started with, and the question of rights, right? So the freedom of speech being one, but there are others: freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of mobility, stuff like this. These are constitutional rights, and this is the fundamental, most important law of the land. And that's it's the same in Canada as well. We have this thing called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which are entrenched, and there's a preamble to these to the Constitution, but also to the rights that recognizes these rights as not conveyed upon us at the whim of the state, but they're God-given rights. The Canadian Constitution, for example, recognizes the supremacy of God and obeying God. This is in our Constitution over and against the laws of the state. So literally, if you have a law, a government that passes a law that violates these rights, that law is null and void. The government bends the knee to my rights, my God-given rights, under the given to me by the supreme God. So we have to have that, and I find with the left that perspective is totally gone. They want to get rid of God. They want to get rid of your understanding of your rights as being entrenched, not instead it's a gift of the state. You don't have a right to it. We can take it away whenever we want. We saw that with COVID, and in Canada and in the US, how they just didn't give a rat's patoot about our rights, and that fundamental disrespect. And in other ways. I mean, look with Canada. I mean, what happened to the Freedom Truckers? This is he crossed the line, as far as I'm concerned. At that point, when he froze their bank accounts, they could kids. He was planning to keep them frozen for weeks, at least a couple weeks or even more. How are you going to feed your kids? You can't get money, and he froze the bank accounts of their friends, or even if you didn't show up, just their donations. That's totally illegal and unconstitutional. They just don't care, and he got away with it. He got a little slap on the wrist because he had his daddy's buddy investigate him, and guess what? He said Trudeau did nothing wrong. So that the lack of respect for our God-given rights is why we see this mass, I would say, across the world, this shift towards the conservative or right wing end of politics, because we do have this healthy respect for our rights. And look, I recognize there are times when, okay, sometimes we have to give up our rights, right? As Christians, we sometimes want to give up rights for a greater good or something like that. But there used to be a healthy respect for a process. In Canada, we have what's called the Oakes test for initiating this reasonable limits on our rights. And you have to go through this three-tiered legal test, right? First of all, the minimization of your rights has to be temporary, and there's a specific time period. It can't go on for like 2 years, like they did with COVID. It has to be proportional. There's a proportionality test, and the government didn't even do that. They didn't care about the people committing suicide, the permanent effects on children, and all this stuff. They didn't give a dang about any of that. They just at a whim, shut down the world and irrevocably damaged it, I would say. Hopefully, Trump, if he gets in, can reverse that. And hopefully, once Trudeau's voted out, we can start fixing the damage they've done. But that's the main point I wanted to say about the rights, is that we have to understand these are God-given rights, not conveyed by the state. And those are supreme above any laws, any bills, or anything like, or any, regulations or anything like that. Those are null and void if they conflict with your rights.
Now, Dale, let me ask you this. Because you played the skeptic for me, but now let me play the skeptic for you.
Okay.
You're talking about God-given rights, but what if I don't believe in God? Why would these rights be important?
So I would say, because God exists, whether you believe in him or not, I don't care what you believe. And the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, recognizes that God exists and confers these rights. I'm sorry, it's in the Constitution.
Yeah. Well, in our
Like it,
Constitution,
amend it.
yeah, but our Constitution, we don't appeal to. I mean, our Declaration, we appeal to nature's God, right? But we don't appeal to uh, a religion or a certain, God in itself, right? What we want to do is say that, look, and this is my opinion, is that, you know, these truths are self-evident, and our justification now is that it's nature's God, right? But the notion, even for the skeptic, is that these rights are naturally ingrained in our genome, basically, that these rights are beneficial even if you don't believe in the specific deity that we do. And to me, that is that predicates a naturalistic shared commonality that we could all agree on. They did agree back in the Revolutionary War and in our history that these rights were beneficial to all. But it seems now that, even as my friend said, you know what, I want somebody to make decisions for me. I want the government to take control, because I don't want to do it myself. Have we entered into the dawn of decadence?
Okay, so I think so. In terms of I think you're trying to be a skeptic, and I see GU is saying. So what are rights? Do rights exist? Absolutely, yes. The rights are basically legal expressions of moral principles and rules that are grounded in God. The freedom of speech is, I'm morally entitled to that, and that is grounded in God. And yes, the Constitution is a written document by human beings. It's a legal expression of these higher God-given moral truths and moral rights. Every being, including God, is bound by these moral rules. God cannot act sinfully or contradictory to these moral rules, which are grounded in Him. Right. So in effect, he is the moral truth, the moral rules, and stuff like that. It's grounded in His essentially morally perfect nature. So, yeah, I have the right to expect God to act morally and to expect every other human being to act consistently with these moral principles.
Right. I agree. I think that um, when it comes to the moral argument, this is what I wanted to kind of transition into, but I wanted to give Gio also an opportunity, because he was talking about rights as a social construction, and everyone, every one of you have and can be, or everyone you have can be taken from you. We don't have rights, we have duties. Duty to serve God, duty to be good fathers, wives, sons, and daughters. I agree with that in a sense. I also agree, though, that yes, those duties and rights, we can conflate those two ideas. But yeah, it's how we react to those situations that will kind of determine the language, I think. I don't know about what you think, Dale, to that comment.
I don't care. Like rights are the same. I just conflate it. Like he's making a semantic distinction without a difference. I think like rights and duties, I equate them as the same thing, right? Like I have a moral duty to
Yeah,
allow you to freely speak your mind on a public street corner.
which I do when I call you a heretic.
Exactly, yeah, and and you have the moral duty to respect my right to go out and speak on the
I
street
do.
corner and stuff like that. So
Right. Right.
great. If you prefer moral duties as opposed to speaking in the legal language of rights, doesn't matter. We all mean the same thing.
So let me transition this because it comes down to, you know, the idea of rights and stuff. What is a God-given right? Um, what is it based off of? Where do these ideas come into play? Right? For me, I can tell you that yes, um, our rights come from a worldview. Right? They come from what we believe, and thus, in my opinion, and I don't even think it's an opinion, I think it's a fact, none of us can really stay out of politics because our worldview determines what we do on a daily basis and how we live our lives on a daily basis, and we enact what we think is right and wrong in society. Even like I don't want of course I'm going to believe that murder is wrong because I don't want somebody going around and murdering people in my community. So I can't stay outside of the political realm. I'm naturally ingrained in it by my very worldview.
So, sorry. Okay. Sorry. Say that again. Sorry. I was just reading something.
Oh, you little slime bag. What I'm
This is
saying,
David Russell Unleashed, after all. So
right?
you got to
No,
work
what I'm
you up.
saying is, Dale. What I'm saying is, my slime feathered friend. What I'm saying is basically our worldview dictates how we act in society, right? I don't think we can stay out of politics for the very reason that we live a worldview in which we expect certain things to be a certain way. Like, I don't expect somebody going out to murder anybody because I think murder is actually wrong, right? I think it's a bad thing for society. So the idea that people say stay out of politics, or people that want to stay out of politics, is it I don't think it's possible. I think that people that are religious because they have a religious worldview, people that are secular because they have a secular worldview, they're going to express those. And for that, they can't stay out of politics. So it's always going to be there.
Yeah, I agree that everybody has a worldview, and secularism is, leftist secularism is probably like the most religious religion I've ever seen. It's essentially a cult, I think, at this point. They think they have the right to freedom from religion instead of freedom of religion. No, our society is a society that's mixed. We allow for the freedom for you to be the atheist. Be grateful for that right. Same with me being a Christian or someone being a Muslim, and we exhibit that. My duty is for that moral, to uphold the principle of classical moral tolerance.
One thing, Dale,
Yeah.
I loved what you said about the atheist. If you want to be an atheist, we also give you the opportunity, and even the religious in this country, we give you the opportunity to participate. But here's the caveat to that. If you get beat out, if your worldview gets beaten in some sort of political way, if your opinion doesn't get ushered to the front, that's the will of the people. Okay? You have to accept it. You can't sit up and riot and hurt people that disagree with you.
Yeah. I mostly agree, kind of thing, right? So long as we're not getting into territory of the tyranny of the majority, right? So
I'm not. Yeah, no, absolutely not. We understand that. You see, in this country, Dale, we have an electoral college that doesn't allow for the tyranny of the majority. You see, we don't allow that. We don't have a democracy. We have a representative republic. So, in that aspect, you know, things like that can take place. We can say, hey, look, your voice matters, and we encourage you to participate, but you may lose in that participation sometimes when it comes to the table of ideas.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, look, we've had to put up with Joe Biden for 4 years. As far as I'm concerned, destroying the country and the world. I mean, we're on the brink of World War III. Inflation. It's just terrible. I've had to put up for 8 years Justin Trudeau. That guy's just horrible. Everybody hates him. Even his own party hates him. They're trying to get rid of the guy as the leader, right? But look, he won the election. So okay, so in our system, in order to prevent wars and just the automatic reaction of, hey, if I don't get my will politically, then I'm going to kill you, take over the government, and I'll rule until I get knocked off or something like that. That's the beauty of this democratic system, right? We give people a limited period of time in office, and then they have the option to vote them out and get rid of them when the system's working properly. And that's a beautiful thing. That's progress. That's a great thing. We don't have to worry about having a tyrannical king on the throne for the rest of his life, and maybe he has a little baby Nero or
Well,
something
you
like
have
that.
a king, right?
Not for practical purposes, but yes, the head of state of Canada is technically King Charles. So yes.
And that's why we're better than you.
Oh, you
Oh,
bully.
me and Dale like to take stabs at each other, guys. You know that. So, but there's not one person in this world that I wouldn't run next to in a fight than Dale Glover. I would run straight to his aid because I believe mostly what Dale believes in a lot of different things, in a lot of the same things. So, with that said, yes, me and Dale like to joke with each other, but at the end of the day, we're close brothers in Christ.
Here's an interesting thing from
Yeah.
GU about Trump. Well, it's your show, so yeah. Do you want
No, go for it. No, no, this is our show.
to? Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So he's saying I find it interesting that the right thinks that the deep state tried to kill Trump. The left thinks it was staged to elect Trump. Um,
It's ridiculous. The problem is whenever you get these type of assassination attempts, everybody has an opinion because we have those freedoms that are involved, right? So the thing is, you'll have conspiracy theories on both sides. When actually, in my opinion, I just think it was a failing of the Secret Service in many different ways. It was a failing of everybody expected a Trump rally to go well. We've never had an assassination attempt in a Trump rally. Usually it's mainly Trump's people that go with him, with the people on the other side of the sidewalk protesting, maybe, even if that. So I think that people got comfortable. We got comfortable during 9/11, and we paid the price. And unfortunately, a good man, that firefighter was a good man. Okay. There were other good people that got hurt. And it breaks my heart to see that another man would sit himself up on a rooftop knowing that he could kill children and innocent people to take down one man that he didn't know. And as somebody that's works with firearms every day I work with firearms, to know that you're sitting up there, to know your target and what's beyond it, and still taking shots which would injure innocent people, and then kill a man because you just disagree with his opinion, is disgusting. And the guy that was on Piers Morgan, and the guy that said, forget the firefighter, F the firefighter, you should lose your career. But you shouldn't lose your career because what you said. You should lose your career because people shouldn't take you seriously and not listen to you. And that's how capitalism could destroy you. Capitalism could make you or break you. If you give a bad product, you give a bad thing to people, they have the choice to buy it or to reject it. We also have the ability to buy your opinion or not buy it. I think the people should have been able to get together and then destroy the career of that person by not listening to him.
Okay, so I'm gonna have.
I'm sorry, Dale. Go ahead.
No worries. I'm
getting passionate.
I'm gonna have a different take with David, and I'm gonna make him extra aggravated here because I'm gonna shame him. I think that he said something very key that prickled my ears a bit when he said it's ridiculous to believe the conspiracy theorists. If you believe that the state was responsible, it wasn't just incompetence. Well, I'm open to I don't believe either way. I think there needs to be an investigation, but I think it's reasonable to question the fact that on the right wing, at least. I don't think the left wing thing, it makes sense. It's implausible. It's very improbable. The right wing does make sense. And we've had plenty of experts. There are questions, right? This guy was spotted 30 minutes beforehand, and no one radioed in or anything like that, or to come after him in a way to try and stop him. Then he was spotted at least 2 minutes before. Nobody radioed in. Again, even if you can't go after him or something like that, you can radio in and say, hey, there's a guy on the roof of the gun, get Trump off the stage. They didn't do that. There was the failure because of a sloped roof. That's ridiculous. Everyone knows that that's ridiculous. You can have Secret Service agents on that roof and be safe. And they spotted this building as a risk beforehand, and they didn't do the obvious common sense thing in terms of having it covered. These are reasonable questions to say. It doesn't mean they are guilty. Maybe it was incompetence, but I agree with the expert, Corey Mills, when he was on CNN, where he was raising this. Look, this is legitimate questions. He's been involved in plenty of operations exactly like this one, and he says, look, that's a sniper's paradise. You always would cover that. It's ridiculous to think you'd have a place 160 whatever it was feet away or something like that from Donald Trump and not cover that properly. That raises legitimate, reasonable questions. So I just remember, I'll show a clip. Here's what I hate: when people like CNN, they shut down reasonable questions. Now, again, pretend I'm wrong and it was just incompetence. Great. But let's investigate that properly and let the American people and the world see that transparent investigation, and then they'll have faith in the system. When you say, no, you can't even ask these questions. No, that's a conspiracy theory. You're an idiot. That makes me go, oh, they're hiding something. That makes people suspicious. You're not having a transparent thing. So, yeah, here's an interview on CNN. I'll just play a little clip of it with an expert on this who knows what he's talking about. And she's trying to shut him down. And that needs to stop. Even if we're wrong in these suspicions, we need to investigate it.
So listen, I'm a public official.
Yes.
Anything that I do, anything that I say in the public. I don't try and hide it in private. I think that the American people need transparency, accountability, and accessibility to the elected officials, not to try and hide behind what we want to look at. And I also think that if the American people know that we're questioning these things as well, it puts them at rest to at least know, why aren't they at least looking into this? Why we should look at every single situation which is of this significance. We should look at it from multiple angles to ensure that nothing is left out, nothing could be potentially claimed as being covered up. Yeah. We need to have more transparency to the American people, and I think that's what everyone deserves.
So, look, I mean, did you see how uncomfortable that CNN host was? That was disgusting. That was pathetic. This tendency we have to mock anyone who just raises questions, and even when they're legitimate ones. No, just for the love of God. If it was incompetence, great. We're open. Let's do a real investigation and find out and satisfy all those conspiracy nuts on the right and on the left that it isn't what they think. Let's do it right. There's a process for a reason.
No, Dale, I agree with you there. I'm not just discounting that, but my problem is, even with a proper investigation that we've done before, we've released investigations to the public, and they still maintain the conspiracy theory, right? So my thing is not to jump to conspiracies, right? More than just being transparent and, hey, look, if it was a failing, I agree. As somebody that has worked with law enforcement and somebody that has that even applied to the Secret Service when I was young,
Oh,
the some of the ideas that from people I knew on the Secret Service is that area should have been covered. Somebody should have been on that rooftop.
Yeah.
Okay, but uh, uh, there are failings, and there are failings of even great organizations such as the Secret Service. That's a great organization, and you know what? I think those guys are incredibly brave. I think those guys are incredibly competent in many different ways, but they're not immune to mistakes. So I wouldn't jump to a conspiracy theory. Okay.
Yep.
Do I think that there should be recourse that happens from this? Yes, I do. I think that there should be an investigation. I think there should be things that are put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again. But I also know that, like every system we have as humans, systems fail sometimes. And the best thing we can do is to try to gather the evidence and go where the evidence lies.
yeah. So here, I think we would agree. Look, don't jump to conclusions, whether it's a quote unquote conspiracy conclusion or a non-conspiracy conclusion. Let's get the facts.
Let's
How
get that.
about
Yeah.
that? Let's base our opinions on the actual evidence rather than what seems right to us in our
Right.
heads and stuff like that.
I was really encouraged that Biden did come out and condemned it right away. I was happy about that, as he should. You
Yep,
know,
that was good.
I do think that was good. Even if he was insincere or whatever, it didn't seem like he was. His body language seemed like he was sincere. Okay,
I think they
and
were sincere for sure.
I think so.
They're,
I
they're
think so.
worried a civil war would have started. I mean, there would have been lots of violence. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't even. Yeah, I don't even. I try not to entertain those ideas. I really don't, because uh, as a person that has studied the Civil War in America and that lives in the prime state where a lot of the battles actually took place, and I see what happened, and I see the fact that places where I could be walking on a dead body right now, like my house could be built on top of where people actually died and didn't get properly buried. I see that it's not something you want to consider. It's not something that you want to take place, because the innocents, the family that you try so hard to protect and provide for every day, are going to be caught in the crossfire. It's something I don't even want to fathom. Even if there's a necessary time for it, which brings me into the next conversation about pacifism, right? One of the things that a lot of people tell me about fighting and stuff like that is that violence is never the answer, this and that. But I disagree. I think sometimes violence is an act of love if it's done in the proper context. What do you think?
So yeah. So I obviously agree with you. I think the Bible is clear that violence can be a necessary evil, right? Especially when it comes to the state defending its citizens. Look, there is the Bible does support a just war theory, and the Bible supports the government when they're functioning properly using the sword. That means capital punishment to enact justice, so that they're there to have law and order kind of thing, right? Not chaos and stuff like that. Now the thing that was questionable for me though, given Romans 13, that I struggled with a lot during COVID and stuff like that was, is it ever okay to for citizens to use violence against government? And what about if you're a Christian? Can that ever be? And at the end, again, I consulted widely here, and I was struggling. I kind of fell on both sides at one time, but
You never consulted me, Dale.
actually, I did.
I'm the American here. Come on, you.
No, I did ask you and Tyler, and you both supported the violent revolts are sometimes
I did.
justified, right?
I did, because at the end of the day, governments are made by people. And if a local government decides to kick off the bounds of the greater government, I think they have that right if it's necessary.
Yeah, exactly. So there are, I think, as Christians, again, there are certain standards by, right? Like if they're not doing their God-appointed job as per Romans 13, and it's a prolonged process, and it looks like it's going to continue in the future unless you do something about it. So it's that last resort, right? So that's one thing. But I also think I'm totally against. Well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm against lone wolves just acting as retaliatory, because again, the thing.
You don't agree with Batman?
No, hold on. Well, he doesn't kill, but the point is.
But he does violence.
This is important. So you're making.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go.
Right. Okay. So the lone wolves, right? So it's never appropriate from a Christian perspective. Let's pretend violence is justified for the sake of argument. You go through the criteria and you're like, yeah, I've got no choice. We've got to do it. It always has to be done for an edifying reason. You can't be in rebellion, like, oh, I'm just trying to attack the government because they're bad and I just want to punish them or something like that. No, it has to be done for an edifying purpose. You have to have a reasonable chance of overthrowing that government and then establishing your own government with law and order. So I think that rules out a lot of lone wolf type situations, right? Where you just, oh, I want revenge, or I just want to attack the government because I'm angry at them, or a bit. No, it's got to be something like with George Washington, where like, look, we're fighting to get rid of this government, overthrow it, and bring in a new government that is good and will fulfill its role. So if you don't have a chance of doing that, and this is why I think, look at the early Christians. Why didn't they do this against Nero? He definitely qualified for being overthrown, but there was no reasonable expectation for them to be successful. And in fact, in addition to that, if they did rebel against the government, that would actually hurt the spiritual, more important aspect of advancing the kingdom. Because why did the Romans and pagans hate the Christians? They were seen as antisocial. And at that time, religion and society was all mixed up. So not only would it hurt the cause for Christ on a spiritual level, there was also just politically, there was no chance for the small minority of Christians to overthrow the government and establish a good government type thing. And I think that's why, even though they had Nero or Domitian, these antichrists, they would have been justified in using violence to overthrow those people. I think they couldn't, because they didn't have a chance at having that edifying purpose. It would have just been, hey, we're just attacking because we don't like this government. It's more retaliatory than anything, or just making ourselves feel good to make a statement like, hey, we stood up to the tyrant Nero. What do you think about that, David? Like, that's something I came to, and I think is the difference, right? But what do you think? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, my bad. I hear what you're saying, Dale. I think there's a time and place. There's a time for war. There's a time for peace, right? The scripture says that. GU also asks, where in scripture is rebellion justified? And I think this is also an important question, because we have to ask, as in your question as well, because it has to do with timing and the notion of things like, what does rebellion mean? Right? Mm-hmm. What does rebellion mean? Does rebellion have to take the form of taking up a sword and charging into a fight? Or can it take place with your words?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can rebel in various ways.
Right? I think scripture justifies rebellion on different levels. The Maccabees, for example, now this is pseudo or this is Deuteronomical canonical things, but I believe God led Judas Maccabeus to overthrow the Greeks.
So I just want to clarify.
I think. Hold on. I think that
Just
in Acts. Hold on. In Acts, the process, what the Pharisees said, that they are not to preach the gospel to the disciples. Their rebellion was preaching the gospel. Go ahead, Dale. Sorry.
So there's no rebellions there, right? So that yeah, or no, sorry, yes, rebellion is never justified, right? So when we're talking about violence, I don't think these are rebellions, because the rebellions, that's the difference between the acts, the edifying purpose for the acts that I'm talking about, right? Like when you're rebelling, even whether it's violent or peaceful, like you're just rebelling as a retaliatory action or for no purpose, right? George Washington, that wasn't a rebellion in a biblical sense of the word. They were fighting to bring in the government. They had to bring in law and order, reestablish God's appointed.
Yeah,
rule.
but Dale, like, okay, so I agree with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's semantical though.
Yes.
Because, like I said, what is the definition of rebellion, right? So your rebellion might be different than the necessity of George Washington saying, look, there's 1,000 Brits invading my home and I've got to do something about it. It's not that I want to go into war with England over it, but I'm not going to let England oppress my people and kill them. It's a self-defense type of thing. That's why I think some of the greatest acts of love are laying your life down for someone else, whether that is you jump and you fight for your wife as maybe a group is trying to hurt her or rape her or something. The best thing of love that you can give her is defending her with your life.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying the biblical, what I believe is the biblical definition of rebellion is where you have that reasonable intention to overthrow the corrupt government or disobey. Again, even disobeying in non-violent ways or non-ways that would overtake it, just like the apostles disobeyed, kind of thing. That wasn't rebellion when they disobeyed the leader. Don't preach in the name of Jesus. I'm going to obey God, not you. They would say, well, that's a rebellion, right? It's a peaceful rebellion of some sort. No, it's not. That biblically, that wasn't a rebellion. Just like what George Washington if it was in self-defense, it wasn't a rebellion. It was a justified use, right? So that's the distinction I was trying to make there.
No, I agree. Exactly. We're saying the same thing, but in different ways, right? So it's just, and unfortunately, some people get lost on this to the degree that it forces us to do, or it forces us to come to different conclusions because we don't really understand stuff like that. And yes, Caleb, I am allowing an open mic. Let me give you a invitation. It's more than
it's the heretic Caleb
my boy over here. I love Caleb, man. I don't care what you guys say. Caleb's my friend, man.
I'm excited whenever he's on.
Hold on, Caleb. Let me give you a link. And G, you're also welcomed as well. Like I said, I don't mind extra conversation here. So by all means. But yeah, I mean, overall, politically, and for my pacifist friends, I do think that love does require at times a reaction that you might not think is good.
Yeah.
Just click on the link and you will be put in the queue, or the queue, as Dale says, with his Canadian weirdness.
I don't say the queue. That's you.
No, I said queue. You say the queue. I say the right thing.
One thing I just want to add on the other side, like for fairness, is there ever a time where Christians should turn the other cheek when it comes to rights violations or something like that?
Oh, wow.
In the understanding. I think, believe it or not, I think that there are times, right? So for example, in Canada, I think Biden and Justin Trudeau have technically, in speaking, they've crossed the line in terms of violating our constitutional rights. So like if you're just giving a snap decision, like, yeah, I think they need to be taken out and put in jail and all this stuff. But there are times where, because there's other options, we need to be patient, right? So the example of the early Christians, right? Like because of their situation and looking at all things considered, in order to achieve the greater good, they put up with, violations of their rights, or, the question of like the suffragettes or something like that. For a while, they would stay peaceful, and even over a period of years, they didn't have the right to vote. They should have that right, kind of thing, or should have that ability as sentient adult human beings and made in the image of God, but they didn't, and it took a long time. And I think they waited something like 40 years before they even considered doing violence. So that there is, I think as Christians, we want to be patient. We want to be like hesitant, as you said, leading to violence or disobeying the government is something that's bad in and of itself. We don't want that situation. It's not morally ideal. That's not the way God wants it to be. We want to find any way we can to reconcile and bring the relationship between the government and citizens back to its proper God-ordained place, if that's possible. And sometimes that may mean we need to be patient and put up with some abuses and some corruption for a reasonable period of time and stuff like that. So I just wanted to give the other side, that it's not like, hey, I can't preach at the abortion clinic. All right, give me the rifle, George Washington, let's go out and get them. You have to have common sense, and you have to look at all the factors and have a reasonable judgment. And sometimes that means putting up with some level of discrimination for a period of time.
Absolutely. I agree. I might even be a little bit more nuanced here, because I do think there's probably more times than not that you actually have to turn the other cheek, because a lot of situations we react in pride.
Yeah.
We react because we don't like somebody disagreeing with us, or we think that somebody's being too critical on us, and we might be immature. We might be arrogant. I just got done lecturing my daughter about arrogance and youth recently, because we go through these phases in life where we are immature, we are arrogant, we think we know what's best, but we need to really take into consideration what Jesus said, which means turn the other cheek, right?
Yeah.
Hello,
absolutely.
Wesley.
Can I
we got two more people, guys. Welcome, GU. Welcome, Wesley Curry. How you guys doing?
Fine.
I'm well.
Awesome. Yeah, so we were talking about some things. Go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us what's on your mind.
You want to go first?
You can go ahead, Wesley.
My name is Wesley Lawrence Curry II. In Leviticus are the words, the sacrifice of the second in the manner. In Zephaniah are the words, the cry of the noise of the fish gate and the howling of the second. So you might expect to say what I will say here to be howling.
Excellent. Yeah,
All right.
Did you have a
GU?
question or like a point?
Oh, I was
I'm
going
GU. My real name is Shane. I'm just idiot from North Carolina, so wasn't trying to be cantankerous with you guys.
Hey, man.
I can type better than I can talk. So,
hey,
but
man.
I'm willing to come on. And,
Hey, GU. We love you in Virginia. We love our North Carolina brothers.
Yeah, I try to love you, Yankees, but
I'm not a Yank. Our capital was the freaking was the South's
Now, I
capital.
married a Virginian, and it's kind of an inside joke between me and my wife because I just call her a Yankee all the time. So.
Right on, man. Okay, so guys, what did you want to talk about? I'll let you go first, Wesley.
I'm. How do I say it and still be? Well, Jesus returned in the clouds with his angels, saying it is time. Back in January of 2003, and Satan emulated Jesus's voice, said, sad and delicious. Jesus appeared in front of every one of you. You may have not have, his face may have been a little blurry to you, but and he appeared to you first on August 25th in the year 2005. He told you a commandment: tell the vision. And he told you tell the vision 3 times. So if you do not say that happened, then you in no way whatsoever speak anything from Jesus Christ. If you deny that God, who created you, appeared to you and told you something, and you want to hold it back by fraud, you are not a Christian. For Jesus said to you, no time to talk Allah. And the meaning of no time to talk Allah is not, you're a Christian, good job, you're telling everybody what I want you to tell them. He also said you want war. Now, Satan told you, using a fire he pulls down from heaven, as written in Scripture, Satan told you this: I will turn and toss you violently like a ball. Satan told that to you on October 10 in the year 2005. That was not the Holy Spirit of God. That was the fire. It felt like an electric rush through your body. And the only part of you that it could not touch, the Holy Spirit of Jesus, which is in your belly like a pearl of great wealth. The reason you could not move when Satan told you, I will turn and toss you violently like a ball, is because Jesus removed the hedge, his forgiveness from your soul. And if your soul is not baptized in all ashes inside, then you cannot move against even gravity. And it lasted for a moment's time when Satan, not the Holy Spirit of Jesus, Satan said, I will turn and toss you violently like a ball. Satan perverted words of Jesus that are written in Isaiah 22. The word of Jesus is, the Lord shall turn and toss thee violently like a ball into a large country. There thou shalt die. There the chariots of thy glory shall be the shame of.
All right, Dale. I'm gonna go to GU on this one before I get to my. Well, I have to introduce this guy because he looks so good over there. Matter of fact, if I was a girl I'd date. No, I'm just kidding. What's up, Caleb, man? It's been so long, brother. How you doing?
What's up, Dave? It hasn't been that long. We did the Near Death show not too long ago.
Yeah, but I wasn't there for Near Death, was I?
Oh, that's right. You weren't. Yeah, well, Dale was there, so that's all that matters. Yeah.
Right on. All right.
I'm going to fix my lighting because it's like really red. I think it's the way that I have this lamp going on here.
All right. Well, I'll go to GU while you're figuring things out. All right. GU, man, what's up, man?
I don't know. If you guys want to get us back on topic, I kind of lost.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. I didn't know what was going on there. It just didn't seem relevant to the topic that we were talking. But yeah, Dale, we were talking about when violence is necessary and when turning the cheek is necessary.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to bring up destiny, right? Because when we're talking about this, like this attitude or something, are you guys familiar with destiny? And
and I saw the clip of him on Piers Morgan.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show kind of a clip about, his kind of fight with Piers Morgan, where Piers kind of asks him, can't you at least just condemn this, what happened to Trump, the shooter trying to shoot and kill Trump? Can you at least condemn that, regardless of our political differences? And he's quite defiant. So I just want to show a clip of that, a couple-minute clip. But I want to discuss his attitude. Like, does he have a point, kind of thing? So is that showing up?
Yes, Dale, it's showing up. Just hit play.
What you said, and I want to talk to you about this in a hopefully in a calm manner to try and understand what you were thinking. So on Saturday evening, hours after the shooting, you said, let me clarify. When I say conflicted, what I mean is I lean towards seeing it as a natural extension of the thing Trump and the MAGA kids support. So I don't think I have much sympathy about the attempt enough to chastise people celebrating it. You couldn't find it in your heart to chastise people for celebrating the near assassination of a man who was president of the United States and maybe again?
Absolutely not. Conservatives have completely bled that well dry. And the idea that they, after engaging in the most divisive and most extreme rhetoric that this country has seen in recent history, that they would come on and beg for sympathy, that it's escalated into some kind of violent confrontation is absolutely insane. Even the idea right now of saying, well, if you call somebody a Nazi for so long, it's, what do you expect people to do? I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh call Obama a communist every single day he was on the radio. You've got conservatives that talk about how the mRNA vaccines were ways to sneak microchips into us. You've got COVID lockdowns that were done because the government was trying to take all your freedom away. They won't acknowledge anything that happened on January 6th. They say that the election was stolen and that your country is being taken from you. I don't think anybody should be killed. I don't think anybody should go and kill anybody. But when you engage in this type of rhetoric and when you turn the temperature up over and over and over and over again, there is absolutely no room for you to be shocked or surprised. And there certainly isn't room for you to ask for sympathy.
Okay, so that's kind of the clip, right? So he's the point that I was going to ask you guys about is that his point is, look, it's not why am I so callous? Why am I at this point? Well, it's all the other side's fault because you did this and this and this and this. It's because of you that I've lost my sympathy. My heart has been hardened towards being able to condemn any hypocritical actions on our part. No, what you guys have done, because you've done it over and over again, is we've got to respond in kind. And the heck with being a human being. I don't care about you guys. So, what do you guys think of that? Should we allow ourselves to become hard of and callous based on, whether you're right or left? I would say the exact same thing as Destiny is, but about the left wing. It's over and over, thing after thing after thing. It never stops with these people's corruption. So should we allow that to cause our hearts to be callous and hard?
All right. So
how familiar are y'all with Destiny? Do y'all know much about him other than that?
I'm not fully aware, but I can tell you this. Let me introduce my wonderful friend, Caleb Jackson, who I haven't seen in a while. You looking good, buddy? How you doing? He's got to unmute, so I'm waiting. You got to unmute, bud. Caleb, you got to unmute.
My cutting out there for a good while, so I didn't know if I was still on or not. Or you addressing? I heard the first 15.
I just said, hey, just introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are. That you're my good friend, and you're looking good, buddy.
Thank you. I know it's really red right now for some reason. I think it's the way that the sunset's happening, but it's all fine. Good, yeah, I'm Caleb, and I'm, as Dave said, his good friend. No, yeah. So I used to co-host this with Dave, or at least back when we were PRA, way back in the day with Paulman and others. Even though Russell's the superior David of the two, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm currently writing a large book on miracles right now. I'm just a Christian author, and I don't have my own podcast, but I go on other podcasts like this one and others just because I like to network like that. So that's typically how I do it. I actually did study politics in college. Is what one of my bachelor's was in, and I have worked in politically adjacent fields of work as well. Not that I'm representing of them here tonight, obviously. This is just my personal opinions. But so, yeah, when I saw the title, I was like, oh, I'm 90, I bet $100 or so that David's going to talk about recent politics. And glad I wish it would have been right.
But so you heard Dale's question as well. I don't know if you heard it, but since you are a political guy,
but the Destiny thing about when to use weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of a lag, but I'm generally very much of a pacifist, so I don't think violence is really warranted in virtually all situations. And so I think you can concede both points. You can say, yes, I think the left and the right both have had very vehement dialogue, very toxic rhetoric that's borderlines on hating each other, and have said a lot of terrible things on each side. And yet I don't think that for one instance justifies any act of violence or assassination attempt towards any person. So you can concede all of those points, and yet I don't think Destiny's conclusion follows at all from what I can tell.
Well, I mean, Destiny, I kind of disagree with violence is never justified or appropriate. I think that's a little simplistic, but I don't want to get into the weeds on that so much as to say that, like, if you know anything about Destiny, he is a very broken person. He just recently got divorced. He made his kind of internet fame career in like internet blood sports debates coming from the left. He got involved in, it was very open about a lot of degeneracy in his marriage and lifestyle. And so it's kind of hard to not expect that type of rhetoric from a person like that. He's just broken. And there are absolutely people on the right just like that. And, you know, when the left's in power, or like, you know, a leftist judge dies, all you have to do is go on Twitter and you see the same kind of talk from right wingers.
One thing Caleb and GU.
Yeah. What happened to treating people like human beings?
I wasn't even necessarily asking
Go
about
ahead.
violence here. It was more about this, him allowing the attitude of his heart, because from his perspective, the right wing has done this evil action after evil thing after evil thing after evil thing, and it's added up to where his heart is callous. He doesn't see us as human beings. He doesn't care about us. And again, it's the same thing on the right. I mean, I can point to thing after thing after thing that the left has, you know, done that's evil, and they've gotten away with it, whereas the right wing, we would get persecuted and stuff like that, or thrown in jail. So I'm kind of wondering, like, the attitude of his heart has become callous, where he's like, you're filth to me. Like, I don't care if you get shot, who cares? So that was kind of what I was speaking to, not like, okay, what does it justify violence? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. And to be callous towards another human being like that, I understand that's sometimes instinctual, but I don't think that's justified, right? Like, if you really believe that someone holds very strongly to beliefs that you very fervently disagree with, then try to convince them out of that and show them why you think you're right, and vice versa. One of you is probably right or wrong. Maybe you're both wrong, but if they're mutually incompatible, it doesn't seem like they're both right. But I think most of our bad actions at least come from ignorance. And one of these sides, if not both of them, have lots of degrees of ignorance. And the best way to fix that is with education. I don't mean formal education necessarily, but just with Socratic dialogue, which is what presumably Destiny likes to do a lot with debates, although realistically it's more for the views and the money and the acclaim on the internet to destroy people in debates, right, rather than to actually have some kind of growth and rehabilitation in thought. And I think that as a Christian is how we have to view people, as made in the image of God. And we have to view people as having redemption. And I think redemption of ideas is just as much a part of that as the redemption of the self as well. So, if you disagree with someone, then perhaps they're ignorant or you're ignorant, but someone needs to learn a lesson. And I don't think the best way to learn that lesson is through violence. I think the best way to learn that lesson is through experience and dialogue.
Yeah, I totally agree on the issue of, again, I wasn't even getting into violence necessarily, but like this, it's that callousness that I see, and some people get this on both the left and the right, and that's a problem. And I will admit, I myself struggled with this at certain times, right? And I was even questioning whether I am a true Christian or not for, about a couple months there, where I was really struggling to overcome this. Thankfully, I did, but you have to remember, look, yeah, we can take actions, whether violent or not, to address evil and injustices, and I think that we should. So I disagree with Caleb, but I'm not a pacifist. I think we should address justice in whatever way is appropriate. But we have to have that proper attitude. We have to remember these are always human beings made in the image of God, and whatever actions we're doing is out of love for them, for others, ourselves, and for God. And we're trying to do what's right, not get revenge or be, bitter or just callous. Like, you're scum to me. So, go ahead and kill all the Democrats for all I care. That's not the Christian attitude. Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened to this divide? I mean, you had, virtually every president in the United States has identified, at least nominally, as some denomination of Christianity, right? So whatever happened to the relationship back in, I don't know, the 1950s, 1960s, granted the 60s, they were starting to get the Cultural Revolution going, but, Democrats and Republicans sat in church alongside each other, pew to pew. And now it seems like it's very much divided. And you really don't see this historically until the 70s and 80s, when you have the evangelicals get rallied up by Jerry Falwell Sr. and other people like that. We get the moral majority. And that's really where you have modern right-wing politics marrying into evangelicalism. But I don't know. I feel like that sentiment has made sort of a bitter dividing line between the left and the right. And I think that's a shame. And I don't know why we can't agree to disagree on these kinds of things. I don't know why we have to see each other as less than human, at least many people do. And I think that's just a shame.
I think we've been pulled apart so much that, I mean, I grew up, my grandmother was a Democrat, my grandfather was a Republican. Her house, my grandfather's passed away now, but their house is still decorated with donkeys and elephants. That's not possible anymore. You can't really share society with people who are, rejecting biology at this point and mutilating children. If you're a Christian, I don't know how we share. I don't know how we reconcile from this point. But it's kind of like what I was getting into in the comments before I jumped on was like, the assassination attempt and how the left and the right both see it. I don't think any of it makes a whole lot of sense. Like the conspiracy stuff Dale kind of touched on, the official story, none of it adds up unless you kind of start to see it where it's not mankind behind this, but it is these powers and it's spiritual, and you try to follow the money or who gets served when these things happen. The only thing that got served was more disunity, That's just the way I see it.
Okay. So one thing I will say, just to qualify, like I don't believe that even if I'm open to the conspiracy, I think it's improbable that Joe Biden went out to, it's one of your comments. It's not like they went out, they cooked up this plan and, let's find a 20-year-old. I think if anything, it was just opportunistic. Like they discovered this guy had a plan or something like that. And they kind of allowed it. Like they allowed the gap or something. So that would be the quote unquote conspiracy theory that I think.
Well, I don't have a problem with conspiracies. Conspiracies exist. We have laws in the books about them, and it's impossible to think that this kid took a 5-foot ladder and an AR-15 onto a roof after they had spotted him like an hour to 3 hours before the shooting. You know what I mean? So that doesn't make sense either. That's what I'm saying. None of it makes sense from a rational, looking at it as human beings are behind this to me. I don't, I don't know. I think there's another layer on top of all this stuff, on top of all the politics in this nation. If what I'm saying is even making sense to you guys, I don't know.
No, I hear what you're saying, but yeah, I'm unsure. There's a lot there to process, but I'm also willing to see. I was around during 9/11, guys. I was 19 years old when 9/11 occurred. And I see where sometimes things fall apart. Not every agency, not every a group can hit the mark all the time. So could it be? Could it not be a conspiracy? Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to jump to those conclusions. I'm going to step back, look outside the box, and do my best to go where the evidence leads. And I think that's the safest route. I think that those that jump to conclusions are doing themselves a disservice. Those that I think do anything less than that, even whether it's one extreme or the other, do themselves a disservice. Dale, what do you think?
Sorry, just phrase your question in a quick sentence. Can you
What?
just phrase what you're asking in a quick sentence? Sorry.
No, I mean, do you think we should go where the evidence leads, basically? This could be a failing, it could not be, but the thing is, the assumptions that that often people take, especially in this day and age. This is why I asked you earlier, are we entering into the dawn of decadence?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That was my whole point. But whether this thing was a conspiracy or not, let's just do an investigation. Look, be open. This is what everybody says. Be open to all possibilities and rule them out on the basis of the evidence and stuff like that. The people need to see the transparency of this investigation process, where they're not just, we're just going to rule out this conspiracy on the right and this one on the left. They're just ruled out because those are ridiculous. We saw what that happens when they do that, during COVID and, going after Joe Rogan. We realized that that's just, stupid. And it's usually indicative of a cover up, that they're trying to get you not to be a critical thinker. They're trying to get you to just believe what we say. No, I'm sorry. People are smarter than that. These aren't.
Well, unless you're from Canada.
Unless you're from Canada, right? These aren't the days of Walter Cronkite. We don't just, Walter says it must be true, kind of thing. No.
Well, we really can't follow the evidence. You know what I mean? Like, we're not there. We're not all we can do is trust what they're telling us. And I mean, right or left, it's getting harder and harder to trust in any institution in this country, So we're never going to know, how did they find the passports, on 9/11? How did they find this kid's name, minutes after the shooting by his DNA, which is what they've told us. We're never going to know these things. But I think the important thing to us is kind of like, how are we going to react and respond to a nation that is being ripped apart, on a fundamental level? Because that's what's happening,
Right. I did want to bring it back around because, Caleb, you said something interesting about pacifism, and I want to hear kind of your take on this idea of pacifism.
Yeah, so I think admittedly it probably does have some convergences with my Christian universalism, right? But I do think that given now I'm not like a complete anarchist, right? My political philosophy would be more libertarian in the sense that I think it's always wrong to initiate force, but if you need to do it to reciprocate, at least from a legal perspective, I think that could be permitted. But from an individualist standpoint about duties, I'm not even comfortable with that, because I just don't see it in the character of Christ, nor in the really actions of the early church. It's really hard for me to find a good example of that. And you can find examples against that, right? Famously, when Peter chops off Malchus's ear and Christ reprimands him for that, right? But it's also the question of, like, if you really are secure in your faith and you have that confidence and you're secure in the faith of your family as well, if I were to defend myself against an attacker, with the potential of, and I think harming them or, disarming them is one thing, but to potentially kill them, at least, you have to ask yourself, if I'm secure in my faith, I know where I'm going to go if he's going to kill me. Do I know where he's going to go if I manage to kill him? And so am I the final bullet that is taking him out, that is sending him to hell? And if I hadn't done that, if he does kill me, goes to prison, maybe has a further chance of restoration, of rehab, of rehabilitation, of changing his heart, how cruel would I have to be the one to cut him off and say, no more chances. I'm playing judge, jury, and executioner here. You're not going to get any more chances. You made your decision, right? And I think that I just can't really fathom that being the right decision in that mind if I really believe that person isn't saved. So I think it would be more noble for me to lay down my life, or at least risk laying down my life, if I believe the other person wasn't saved. And that's sort of how I come about that as a Christian,
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, and I resonate so much with the heart behind it as well. The only thing that, and I think we agree here, there are circumstances where you have to be that last gunman, right? You have to be the one that takes the person out. There has to be, there are certain situations that you've got to be there to maybe save someone else, that you don't know. I think when I look at this, when it comes to pacifism, is I don't think, I think we have this common perception of love that doesn't, that says no harm, right? Love has no harm, right? But I think love is more diverse than that, right? So if we're put in a situation where the most loving thing to do is to protect somebody by actually having to hurt somebody else, I think there are justifications for that. And I think that what you said, you agree with. But there are those certain aspects. And I think Caleb is speaking to the heart of the individual, that every individual should be asking themselves when they engage with somebody else is, is this person closer to Christ than I am? I think that's
it's
very
discernment
important.
too. It's discernment. And I mean, like, do I have Christian love for my wife if someone's coming into our house for me to let that person kill them because I don't want to take their life? That wouldn't be Christian love to me.
Yeah. So I think love is a lot more. It's bigger. It is the ultimate ethic, right? We know that. And how do you respond in love to certain situations? And that's something that I think people have to ask themselves. Because we see Jesus acting in different ways. Caleb, you said stuff about the early church and stuff. Yes, I think there's as Dale was saying, there's times where the other cheek has to be turned, and that that most of the time I think that's the case. Because I think most of our reactions are in pride, and I think most of our reactions are in this idea of self-worth when we should be selfless.
Yeah. And it goes back to discernment. If 15 armed communists, if you're in a communist country, are coming to your house and beating down your door, and they're saying, deny Christ or we're going to kill you and your family, maybe that's when pacifism kicks in. You lay your life down because you're not going to deny Christ. And that's, and that can display Christian love to yourself, your family, and to those 15 armed communists.
But why is that? Why is that the only? Okay, like if you were a recent convert in, let's say, outside Jerusalem, and Saul of Tarsus comes knocking on your door, ready to kidnap you and your family and take them to prison for being a Christian, right? Now you might not denounce Christ, but if you have a knife, are you fighting back? Are you trying to slit his throat? Or are you going with hands open, saying, "Yep, take us"? Like are the only options surrender or denouncement, or do you think fight back is something that the Christians should have done for Saul or for any of the original Romans who were trying to execute them?
I think that's where discernment comes into play, because we know martyrs like watch their children be crucified in front of them. They did that, and through that sacrifice, it changed Rome. But I think I keep using the word discernment, but like in this day and age, like, would I allow someone to kill my nephew who I don't know if he's saved or not right now? Would it be love to, what I mean? That's a totally different situation from what those early Christians were dealing with in the Roman Empire. In my opinion.
I think it's wrong to assume that this applies to every situation, right? I think we have to understand where it applies and where it doesn't. And I think we have to follow the guidance that we feel that is in our heart from the Holy Spirit the best way possible. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that God's going to fault us on where we went wrong in every situation, but I do think he'll fault us where we know we went wrong and we went wrong anyway. Again, I believe what you said about discernment. I do think that there are times where war is necessary. I think there's a time for war. There's a time for peace. I do think that's the case. I think Christ's example shows us the norm. But I also think that there are times where I think the greatest love to show somebody is laying your life down for them, whether that's, keeping the attacker at bay and dying, or just going to the cross. I think there's certain situations that this applies to differently. And I think it's wrong to assume that every situation requires the same response.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know where in pre-Constantinian Christianity you see advocations of war or anything like that.
I don't think you do.
Yeah,
absolutely, Caleb. I don't think you do, because I don't think that the prerequisite was met for that. Where I think if we see the American Revolution, I think those prerequisites were met, right? Where a local government that is covered by something like Romans 13 could say no more from the king's government that lived a half a world away, that was trying to put stuff on them that they shouldn't have, or invade.
You don't even have to go that far, though. I mean, those same Christians.
I used it.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, those same Christians, in that same empire, when barbarians were at the gates, it wouldn't have been, the men took up arms. It wouldn't have been love for them to allow the barbarians to come in and just rape all their wives and daughters. You wouldn't do that, and the church hasn't taught that.
Yeah, but you've heard the Crusades, or even like the 6th century, like that's still centuries removed from the original.
Well, I don't know if we want to get into the discussion, because I am Orthodox and I believe that same body of Christians has existed from the 1st century to now. I don't think they're different. It's a different body of Christians. So, but I'm just, those were Christians that took up arms and defended those Christian cities.
Yeah, but even GU, even as an Orthodox, that there is a lot of Christian history between those those 2,000 years, and like even I mean, we don't even have to jump to the Crusades. Let's just keep it back to our
well, the Orthodox didn't do the Crusades,
right? Oh, of course. Well, no, you guys did before the Crusades with the Byzantine Empire and using Vikings to help you out. Even to take back a Sicily is one of them, right? So like, right. So like, let's look at that. But let's not look at that. Let's go back to the early question. It was a different dynamic. It was a different time. There were different circumstances in which we had to advocate a certain response to allow for a certain outcome. And I agree with that. I think that's the heart of Christianity. I think that God dictates how we respond. The Holy Spirit leads us into that truth. Is there a time where we support the local government in kicking off the King of England? I think so. Especially when it's called for, right? Is there also a time where we have to go to the martyr's pit? Absolutely. This is why I said this whole conversation would be controversial, because there's times where we're going to try to figure out where this goes. And I think there's times and places where violence is a response to love. And I think that love sometimes requires sacrifice.
And if your eyes are off of Christ, love can be kind of twisted and weaponized against you. I mean, we can see that in another kind of political situation that we're dealing with right now, as far as like immigration, because people are attacking the Republic. The left is attacking the right now because of the RNC. They were holding up the deportations now sign. And, you see the left accusing them of being false Christians because they're not loving the stranger the way that the Bible commands. But it's also not love to allow your country to be, the poorest communities in your country to be overrun by more poor people. And then the resources are spread so thin that everyone suffers, so these things can be twisted.
You're right.
Far out of what Christ wants them to be,
Just on certain aspect. Go ahead, Caleb.
Just remember, it's WWJD. Who would Jesus deport? Right? No, it's a joke, but I have to say that. I don't know. Like, again, I think that this is where it's really great for me, because I think a lot of the issues, there's not, to me, a clear biblical answer, at least for many of them, because I could completely understand the argument about the economic situations, although realistically, immigration is usually a net positive to most economies. But even putting that aside, I think as a church, we would have an obligation. Like, I don't know, if there was a church in Texas that was housing, let's say, an undocumented a family who was here illegally, and they had lied to ICE about it, do I think that the government should punish that church? My gut instinct to say no, absolutely not. But can you hold that view consistently and also be in favor of deportations, right? Because if that's the case, then churches are going to be directly getting in the way of that. But this is where it gets very complicated with following their own convictions versus following what the law says, And so I'm not saying that there is a right answer here, but I don't think I could completely understand a Christian having that sympathy and believing that's the right side of the issue, and someone on the right who's a Christian thinking it's not. So I just sort of reject this idea that one side is clearly more Christian oriented for the most part on the political spectrum. I think it's much more gray than that.
Well, Dale, what do you think, man? I haven't heard from you.
Before Dale, before you get into it, can I just say good night to you guys? My wife just got home with dinner, and I appreciate you having me on. Hope to do it again.
Yeah, man. Love to have you on again, Gio. Thanks for being here.
God bless you guys.
Yeah, you too, buddy.
All right.
Dale.
So the issue of immigration, right? Is that what we're talking about?
It's what was brought up, but I mean, we don't have to spend all the time on that. It's wherever you want to go to on that.
Okay. So yeah, if I'm allowed to bring up a slightly different topic.
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot between the left and the right, and it's claimed opposite ways that, look, the left has changed. It's become the far left. So I'll hear a lot of former leftists, right? Tim Pool, ordinary people who are lifelong Democrats, and they'll say something like, look, I didn't change. The party changed. They've gone far left. And leftists will say the same about the other side. Like, someone like S.E. Cupp, who's a lifelong Republican and stuff, and she'll say, look, I've stayed the same, but the Republican Party has gone far right. They've changed. So I'm just kind of curious. Do we see that the political parties have fundamentally changed? Have they actually gotten further apart? Or is it, what's going on there?
Yeah, no, I think they definitely have. I don't think that even within the last 10 years, I don't think that Trumpism, this kind of Republican populism, would be really that much similar to the neoconservatism you see in the Bush administration or even the Reagan administration. And I don't think that the progressivism you would see espoused by someone like Bernie Sanders or even maybe Joe Biden to an extent would be analogous to John F. Kennedy or even Bill Clinton at that point. And part of that's because priorities change and policies change over the years. And there are different issues, like transgenderism wasn't really being talked about all that much in the 1970s on political party platforms because it wasn't an issue. And civil rights are not nearly talked about as much as they were in the 60s because it's not nearly as big of an issue, although there's still a lot of progress to be made there. So I absolutely think that parties have changed, and I'm sympathetic to that. And that's why people like, Bill Maher, for example, who is a staunch Democrat, constantly rails on the left because he thinks that political correctness and wokeism has gone way too far, and that's what's turning people off. In the same token, I think a lot of Republicans are sort of turned off by this really nasty situation that we've seen with Trump and people in the MAGA movement that's sort of changed this, what was once evangelicalism and Bushism and compassionate conservatism, right? And the arguments about, character matters when it comes to someone like Bill Clinton. Like, yes, having an affair with Monica Lewinsky, even though it doesn't affect policy, it still matters because it reflects who a person is. Going from that to saying, well, it doesn't matter what their personality is. I don't like them personally. All I care about their policies. I think that is a major shift to sort of doubling down on that. I think that's just a really interesting evolution you see in the party dynamics.
That's interesting. I'll just say this. I was MAGA before I was MAGA then, because I remember even I think it was in grade 8 when I learned about Bill Clinton's affair. And even back then, I'm just like, I don't care. Like, it's his personal things. I'm not electing a pastor. Like, I would be electing a political leader. And as long as the policies are good, that's all that matters. Again, I knew nothing about politics back then, but I just remember hearing about it and saying, that's his personal, it's wrong, but why should I care?
And maybe that's true, and you might be right or wrong about that, but the point is that's not the position that most of the Republicans back in the 90s were taking, and that's not, and that position that's taken in the 90s is not the position that most Republicans now would take. So there definitely is a shift there. But no, I do think that one could argue that character matters. Obviously, most presidents have had baggage on them. That's just what happens when you're a powerful political figure. But for you to be able to do that, I think shows a sense of lack of respect for certain moral codes and laws. And when you're chief of the executive branch are expected to enforce the rules, right? And if there's rules, even in a covenant, in a marriage, that you're not willing to follow, and not only not willing to follow, but when you actively lie about it and deny that it happens when you do wrongdoing, does that attitude bleed into other things when there's a scandal, when you're doing things that may not be ethical as president, and you're willing to lie to the public about other things as well? Or is it saying, oh no, it's okay if they lie about their personal things, but they would never lie to me about policy issues? There, I think they're going to be mostly honest with me. I don't think that falls at all. I think if someone's willing to, do something like that and to break laws in order to do that, to falsify records, perhaps to cover up something like that, I think that really shows a handprints on their character that would bleed into other areas. And at that point, you have to say, well, what rules do they respect? What would hold them back? What rule of law would they follow, right?
That's a really good point. So obviously that was my mind as a grade 8, but I have been a little bit more sophisticated since I grew up. And I think, so I don't care about, personal behavior or private stuff or whatever, so long as it doesn't impact upon policy, or I don't have a reasonable expectation that it would probably do so. So in the case of like Trump, like, okay, we've got his established record, right? So, okay, look, here's an example I could say, just to give an example to how I would assess this. Both parties claim that Joe Biden is racist and that Trump is racist. Let's pretend that's true, just for the sake of argument. They both actually are racist or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now with Trump, I would say I would look at what he did. I don't care. None of his policies were racist at all. In fact, blacks had unprecedented employment under his reign. He did great things. I forget. Mr. Reagan has a list of certain things that he did for blacks specifically, and that's why a lot of blacks love him and stuff like that, right? So it didn't translate to policies, and that's provable, kind of thing, from what he actually did in office. Whereas Joe Biden, I can point to where it translates to policies, right? For example, in the 1970s, he supported segregation, right? And, that directly stemmed because he believes blacks belong in he doesn't want schools to be racial jungles or something.
Right.
So that belief directly translated to a political policy. So that's where I would take issue with his personal beliefs when it reasonably influences what they would do in their job.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but that sort of stems to other areas as well, right? Like if they are willing to do that, like are they willing to, I don't know, to have loose business practices? Like if they are a really sleazy business person, does that affect how they're going to regulate other corporations and tax other corporations, maybe give them some benefits for that for the sake of their own financial gain, right? Or if they're going to illegally accept campaign donations and not report those, does that mean that they're going to be looser on campaign finance law, right? Like you even look at someone like Hillary Clinton, who talks about how much she's going to regulate Wall Street and yet accepts lots and lots of money from Wall Street. I think that seems like a conflict of interest to me. Or if someone's talking about election security and holding up democracy and yet is willing to, submit falsified electoral signatures for ballot certification for the vice president to not, incumbent the next president in line. So all of that, I think, is relevant, certainly, to how they play out. And I think that's why there needs to be a rule of law that's respected. And that's why for both of these candidates, I'm not at all confident that metric is really being upheld.
Could David, I know you want to come in, just one quick follow-up for
sure,
both of you, if you don't mind. But so one thing, when I studied politics kind of thing in school, again, I wasn't in a full-time program in that, so I'm not as advanced as you and stuff, but I have taken courses as part of my business and philosophies and stuff like that. But one thing that I learned, that it's in government, it's not so much as important, is this person actually guilty or not? It's all important about the perception of, being innocent, or the perception of not having a bias. And I actually I'm starting to think that's more of a problem, because we're starting to, it has its place, right, but we're going overboard with it to the point where it's, ridiculous. Like, this implausible stream of like what could lead to this perception of this, and that would lead they're guilty or something like that. Like it's actually interfering with getting the best person in the job, and we're saying that people can't do the job, or they're guilty of something that they're actually not, and it's hindering government.
Well, for me, and this is probably where me and Caleb would disagree a little bit, is that there is who do you believe? What Caleb was saying about, not being confident in both candidates, I've actually seen the arguments on both sides, and I'll be honest, I don't know what to believe at certain points, because there's justifications for what Trump did, right? And I'm just going to use Trump as an example, right? Where does the evidence? Maybe Caleb studied more into it. So
wait, can I just clarify justifications for what specifically? Because that's
okay. So yeah, and that's the point that you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. Look, I would just say, because you said study this more. I haven't looked at every case in depth, and
either have I. And that's what I'm trying to bring up.
And look, Trump is presumed innocent, right? I think he is presumed innocent. The burden of proof is on the burden of proof of evidence is on the person making the claim of prosecution. Completely agree with that. As of now, he is.
I do too.
We should consider him as of now legally not guilty for the January 6th indictment, the Georgia indictment, and the classified documents indictment. Unfortunately, there was one other one where he did get his day in court. He was able to get a fair defense. He was able to have a jury decide this. He was able to present his own side. He didn't have to testify against himself. And that is a case that I don't know if you saw, I actually did a whole hour-long presentation on, based on, and this was me trying to find the original documentation, following the transcripts of what was said, trying to look at every piece of evidence and give both sides as if you were a jury member themselves. Obviously, it's not the same experience, but as close to that experience as possible, right? And I think that a reasonable person could come to the conclusion that Trump did technically violate New York state law, as was what was being accused, right? Now, you could say, fine, maybe he did, but he's still qualified to be president. That's a separate argument. You're willing to say that. But from my experience, most people don't even want to do that. They want to double down and say, no, he's not, because I think there is an uncomfortableness of acknowledging that if it were the case, if we granted for this argument, he really did break the law and he really is a convicted felon, that would put a hampering on his credibility, his fitness, or how much, what have you, right? I think people sort of had tendency, which is why most of them double down. And it is interesting to me that I think Republicans don't apologize for anything, and I think Democrats apologize for everything. It's like they're the super. Democrats, there's a bad debate and they're like, oh my gosh, get rid of this guy, he's so terrible, we can't do this. Whereas the other candidate gets convicted of felonies and they're doubling down oh, he's still our guy, we're still sticking with him. It's just kind of funny how
I think it depends on the guy, Caleb.
Of course
it depends on their guy, right?
I agree. I don't think anyone else, I don't think if this was any other person, like Bob Menendez, right, just got found guilty of bribery, Democratic senator, I don't see anyone defending him. Right? It seems like he's getting bipartisan condemnation. George Santos, seems like everyone didn't like him, bipartisan condemnation. But when it comes to this particular person, that's why it's called the Teflon Don. No, I don't think anyone has or really could get away with as much alleged.
Well, Obama is above reproach to any Democrat, right? So I mean, we see that. But let me
have an example. Because
hold on. I'm going to finish my. Let me finish.
And by the way, I'm not saying that other people are off either, right? I think that Joe Biden, the classified documents, I think that should be scrutinized more. I think absolutely. I'm perfectly fine with investigating him on any alleged wrongdoing. All I ask is that we have investigations into it. We present them. If there is enough evidence to indict them, we indict them. We put them in front of a trial. We give them a fair chance to defend themselves. We give them a fair chance to look at the evidence. And we decide. That's all I'm asking. Unfortunately, we're probably not going to get that for the other cases because they're not going to get resolved for the election. So we're going to the ballot box, not having answers to these difficult questions. And I would rather just have a yes or no to, if he's not guilty, great. That would help relieve my conscience. And if he is, that would make it worse. But not knowing is worse than doing it either way. So I don't know why if he really believes he's innocent, that he's not so willing to clear his name and get this over with. But it seems like he's kicking and screaming to not have to go through it,
Well, there's a lot to that, Caleb, at least from my perspective, is that, you had a man that he endured certain court trials, but never was he a felon before. You know what I mean? We've dealt with Trump for I mean, 3 decades before, and everybody was okay with Trump, you know, and just now because he ran for president, now they're just trying to bury him in every little thing they can. You know, that you've got to take into consideration. And I think that's why a lot of people are doubling down on certain things because, you know, we've had Trump as a Democrat. We've had Trump as a Republican. We've had Trump in several different parts of our society, in our media, in our entertainment, in our lives all throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now, since he's president, he's now being hit from everything under the sun. Now, is that a part of being a political figure? Probably, you know, but as you're saying, I think that there's a big idea of we need answers, right? And I do agree with that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And look, certainly that's
100%.
true. Certainly that's true. Look, when you're a prosecutor, whether that's a local sheriff or a federal prosecutor, right? You cannot pragmatically convict every single crime out there, alleged crime out there, right? You don't have the resources, time, and money. It's not everyone can be pulled over for speeding. You have to prioritize who you're picking on. So yes, when you have among your list of contenders someone as high profile as Trump or a senator, that's going to be a priority for you, right?
Right.
So sure, I completely contend that. It does not follow from that therefore it's unfairly prosecuted, therefore he didn't do it, right? It could completely be the case that someone is intentionally being aimed at because they're a high profile figure, and yet they also really did do it, right? So that I'm not saying that you're denying that, but that is a fair point. And the other thing is with the 4 indictments he has, all of them except for the classified docs one are directly related to him running for president. So he couldn't have been, indicted, for example, for falsifying business records to cover up election donations because he wasn't running for election prior to 2016. So you couldn't really have that indictment. Or the January 6th one wouldn't make any sense if he wasn't president, or the Georgia one. The classified docs one wouldn't either because he wouldn't have had access to classified docs before he was president or before he was elected office. So all those kind of have to chronologically fall after he is either running for president or was president, just because that's the nature of the crime, you know?
No, I hear you 100%. And, it's all these things that we have to take in consideration when we look at this. I know, Dale, you wanted to say something real quick. I jumped on you. Sorry, buddy. Go ahead. He's done unmuting.
I was just going to give you guys a better example of what I was asking about in terms of perceptions versus actuality. So I was going to get off Trump and stuff like that. I was going to give the example of Brett Kavanaugh. Like, look, in terms of what happened to him, it would utter failure in a court of law. There is no actual real proof that he's guilty of raping this woman at all. And it would utterly fail in a court. That's why they can't go after him legally at all. But I remember the Democrats at the time saying, who cares? That's not the standard. Where this is a political standard, right? It's about the fact that this woman gives her testimony and stuff like that. That's enough to cause this perception that maybe he did it. And just based on that perception, he's not right for the job. He should be excluded from the job just because that perception of doubt exists in certain people. That's what I'm saying. That's going too far. That sickens me. That's where we're going. It's too much. No, that's not right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Dale, on that. I think that, again, presumption of innocence is a real thing, and we have a system to where, although I generally do think women should be believed, if we have to officially decide this in a court of law in front of a jury with a defense attorney, with a prosecutor, going over the evidence, right? And that's the most fair way to say it. So I agree with you that we cannot assume that Kavanaugh is guilty because we, the public, do not have all the evidence. We don't have his defense attorneys trying to poke holes in the evidence. We don't have the prosecutors giving us all of the records in between them, all that stuff, right? So that's unfortunately the reality it is. That doesn't mean that he did or didn't do it, but again, this is where a burden of proof happens. So I agree with that, but I also understand the argument to say that, for example, if you were going through a job interview and there was this accusation against you at the time, and you were to say, oh, like it's currently being settled in court, right? I think it would be perfectly reasonable for the boss to hold off on hiring you until that was settled. And if it was settled and you were found to be absolved of it, great. And if not, then maybe you wouldn't. So I think at that point, what it seems like we should do is to put that on pause and say, let's take care of this first. Let's go through the legal court system to get this resolved, which unfortunately can take a very long time. And if this is resolved, great. We'll consider him again if there's another, spot open in the future, or maybe for a different one, right? So I think reserving judgment and out of precaution is fair, but I agree that we shouldn't assume guilt, right? But I don't think reserving judgment is assuming guilt either way.
Yeah, the only problem I have with that, Caleb, is that there's certain positions that you can't do that with, right? So like when you're dealing with the presidency, you can't be like a regular job.
Yes,
right? So like, yes, yeah, exactly. We've got a whole different thing here. But right. Like when it came, I haven't seen your hour-long presentation. I'd love you to send me a link to that when you can. I've seen a lot of sides to that story, and I really do think part of it.
It came out right before the conviction, by the way, so I don't have any. It was like, I think on May 30, or it was like probably 2 or 3 days before they actually rolled on it. So it was pretty close up to it. But I don't take a position on that. I will tell you personally, from looking at that and from the stuff I've seen, I do think that if I was on that jury, I would be inclined to convict. But I do give in that video, I think, both sides. And I think the defense, there are some decent arguments on the defense side. I don't think it's a super clear-cut case, but I do think that it's more than just a tiny bit of evidence, and it's not just Stormy Daniels said so, right? As many people want to say, it's a lot. I mean, and again, I show a lot of it there. It's a lot of bank records. It is phone call records. It is some of its audio recordings of Trump talking to his lawyers. Some of its cell phone correspondence. Some of its emails. There's more than a little bit, and documentary evidence is usually much more solid than just testimonial evidence.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And like just for me, I mean, just from my limited knowledge, I would probably not convict from due to all the other factors that were involved, and from my particular standpoint. But I do understand what you're saying, and if I have any more evidence, and if there's things I missed, I'd be willing to consider anything like that, because I think everybody should be scrutinized. I think they should be critiqued. I think they should be run through the gauntlet to be qualified for such a position, right? But like, getting this back to the original point is, I do think what Dale said about perceptions, I do think that is it does play a factor. People's perceptions of things, which I think we see the results are in this country, is a big factor into why people vote who they want to vote for, because they have a perception and they're not willing to change from that perception. They're not willing to look at the evidence. And that's unfortunate, because we should be, and as a host of the show, I promote, and I know Caleb and Dale do, to go where the evidence lies, right? And if you don't like the conclusion, if you disagree on the conclusion, you should be able to accept either or, and either stand on what you believe and argue for it, and repent when you're wrong. I'm not saying that, you have to be this contrite person when I say repent. What I'm saying is, when you recognize the fact, when you do your investigation and you see that someone like Caleb or Dale are right in a position, accept that you're wrong. You got to do it, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is how we change. It's how we grow as a person.
Right. And I think that's the other frustrating thing, is that on all across the board, I'm just not seeing, from federal politicians who claim that they are Christian, I'm not seeing that repentance on either side, right? I never saw, at least initially, Bill Clinton repent for the affair. In fact, he denied it originally. Same goes for alleged affair with Trump. Same goes with Biden for his alleged misdeeds and all that stuff. I think on both sides, it just sickens me that I think we're at a point in politics now where people continue to double down and continue to maintain their innocence, which they have a right to do up to an extent. When you continue to do that, even after you've been found to be liable or guilty or what have you, again, on both sides, I think that is where it is really frustrating. And that is unchristian.
Caleb, this is where I've asked the question over and over again tonight. Are we are not even entering? Are we at the point where we're at the dawn of decadence? It's a true question, and it's one that Rome faced and fell for. You know, I don't know if you guys ever read the book, but the Dawn of Decadence. It's one of the courses I had to study in theology. But yeah, I mean, it's very real. Are we entering that stage? I think we have. Is America in the dawn of decadence? I think we could go both ways. We could go one way or another. Dale supports Trump. Unfortunately, I can't support the other guy because of my worldview. So
it's where you have RFK and third parties to go to for your.
I can't do RFK either. I know his stance on abortion. I can't stand his stance on abortion.
You know, that's a fair. I think that's actually a really interesting question too. Do you think that because I know people cite that a lot, and that's a fair argument, but do you think being a one policy voter is a good thing, or do you think we can look at the broad spectrum of different things? Because there might be some policies you think are more Christian in some ways and some others, right? So, like, do you just find abortion to be so egregious that is a priority for anything else? So, like, even if there was,
I do, bro, and I'll tell you why. Is that there are some things that are more egregious than others, right? So if you were lax on immigration, because my view on immigration is the more people coming into the borders is the more people I can preach the gospel to, you know, and that there's some ramifications to that logically, and you know I'm opposed to it, but I can preach the gospel to those people, right? So there are some areas that are less egregious, but when you're killing the innocent human beings that haven't had a choice or haven't had the chance to live, the most innocent among us are getting slaughtered. That is the most egregious, and that's where I have to take a stand and say there's a line here that if you cross, I can't go further. So yes, there are certain issues that are, and there's certain issues that aren't. As we said, I think in this whole broadcast, there's certain things that we can disagree with, but there are some hard lines that we have to take. And I think there's something such as abortion is one of those areas.
Yeah, and look, I'm sympathetic to that, but I think that's a very complicated issue because you can look at why are people having, you know, less kids and stuff like this, and a lot of that's economic factors. There's a million and one different things that it is, right? And granted, I'm not saying that you're holding this, but there are some conservatives that are like wanting to put regulations on birth control and stuff like that too. And I feel like that's counterintuitive because now you're going to get more unwanted pregnancies, right?
Well, you have abortive birth control, Caleb, and you have not abortive birth control.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's true. But I'm even talking about there's some hyper, you know, more leaning towards Catholicism ones who want even birth control, or like IVF as another example, right? Where that's definitely a gray area. And the Southern Baptist Convention just came out against that too for the first time based on the Alabama Supreme Court decision. And those are more complicated issues, right? Because on the one hand, something like IVF is, if you think that a zygote is a person, then consistently, yes, that would be murder to throw them all out. On the other hand, it's sort of the opposite of abortion in the sentiment because these are people who desperately want to have kids who can't, not people who are trying to get rid of babies when they're pregnant with them. So intentions are much better. And you could say maybe the path to hell is paved with good intentions, but I don't think that it is obvious to me. And even though I do have my own personal pro-life convictions, I do think that's where it gets difficult in terms of where do my personal beliefs stand versus where do I feel like a belief is between someone and God, right? When they do something wrong and that's for them to be learned. And where do we draw the line between regulating sins as crimes?
Between
God to judge them, right?
But isn't all sin turned into crime? I mean, when you really think about it, when you think about our sin and you think about our lack of doing what's right. It all comes down to that. I mean, the fact that we have laws in the first place is because we have sin, right? I mean, when you really break it down on a fundamental level.
Sure, but you would agree that there are some sins that you don't think should be crimes, right?
I don't know. I'd have to hear a list. So,
okay, so
there's some things that are ridiculous, and I get you. I get you there, right? But
so do you think that there should be fines or any kind of penalization if the government were to find out that two unmarried couples were sleeping together without a marriage license? Should that be any kind of, whether a fine or whatever you want to do? Should the government care at all about that, or should that be?
I think that depends on the reflective community, right? Federally, no. State and locally, that might be something for them to figure out, right? Because like you're a libertarian, right? So I understand that.
And being a libertarian, by the way, does not mean that you endorse that you're advocating for it. It's simply saying that
exactly.
You think that you think that people should be able to do it of their own volition, even if you.
So I've also told you that I hold a lot of libertarian views because I'm a constitutional conservative, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that I think are in the pure view of the community, and I think there are things that are in pure view of the federal side of it. Now that's where my Hamiltonian views come in. Now I know you're laughing at that because I use Hamilton, but yes. What's that?
It's a good musical, by the
way. Yeah, but like the whole idea is, yes, I do think there's a federal systematic in government, and I do think there's a local, and I think that local community does have to determine what is the value of that local community, and has to deal with that in the capacity of that local community. If it damages that local community, I think that there's certain, if you want to say sins, we might say sins, but sins always translate into law when it comes to the worldview that they promote. So you can't separate those politics from a worldview, because what you believe about right and wrong are what you're going to put in as a policy and a moral system that governs your society. So it depends on that community and what that community values and what that community holds to. And yes, I think federally overall, peoples, that there's a responsibility given to that federal headship as far as that local headship as well. Sorry, maybe we're different there, but that's where I kind of
I know when you start talking about communities making the rules, it just makes me think of another ideology that has the word community, and then you just add an ism on the into it.
Oh gosh, here you go.
Right, and then it's like, oh gosh, that sounds.
But you see, I justified myself when I said there's a federal headship over it, right? So, so like I think that the system we have in place, where there's 3 systems of government, is necessary, to where if a community is going wrong and they're violating those amendments, such as like your God, some of these things that we all agree. That I think that we all can come to a common place and say, look, these are God-given rights. These rights are self-evident. If we violate those as a community, I think that's where the precedents can be taken to overturn such things, where we don't have that communism. That
about. And I guess to me, it just seems like freedom is what should take priority. Because when I look at questions of theodicy, right? Why does God allow evil? I think a lot of that does come down to human autonomy and freedom. And so, right. And so you and I would both agree that, look, God, given he has more options, but if God has the option of A, having people always do the good without free will, or B, having people have free will and sometimes do good, sometimes do bad, second option is better, right? So if we were to apply that principle to say it is better for someone to have the freedom to make the wrong decision than it is to coerce someone to make the right decision, that's the same principle that I would think would apply within communities, within government, within individuals, to say, like, yes, I think it is wrong for Fred to shoot up heroin, right? But I think it would be worse for me to come in and say, Fred, if you ship heroin, I'm going to throw you in jail and take away your liberty. I think the best option would be, I mean, obviously the best option would be for him not to do it, but if he's going to do it, to do that, to learn from his mistakes, to realize what he's done, to convert, to repent,
right?
Do that. And I don't think that threatening him with violence or with a fine or with government.
No, but here's the thing is that I also know, Caleb, that as a society, as a human species, we've evolved, and we see that if Fred and then Bob and then Caleb and then Dale, because Dale's Canadian, because he'd obviously do it, but then we see Tyler and then Josh decide to shoot up heroin, that they would have a negative effect on the community, that we'd have to actually put some things in place where Bob and Dale might not do it, and, you know, put Caleb in jail because he's doing it because he shouldn't be doing it. I do understand those things too, but that is all relegated in the fact that we have a process of government that goes through a 3-tiered system or a hierarchy or something that is able to also determine what is good for the society and what is not. And it's based on something like a representative republic. So that's where I think things can come into place, that we can put some safeguards in place and have a functioning government, have a functioning system that takes into account the communal aspects in retrospect, or even in congruence with the federal aspect and the overall aspect, in which that we can have a successful preamble to a way of life that is insistent on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, with laws that are able to put a barrier around certain things that allow us to do things and not. And I don't think something like abortion could coexist within that place logically, because we know for the fact scientifically that human development begins at conception. Mm-hmm. And to kill a human being, an innocent human being, is wrong on every level. And I think that's a morality that we can come to, not just in one worldview, but in many.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But this, again, it gets complicated because you have, I mean, like you have.
I just said a lot of complicated things.
Yeah, no, certainly it is. But like, I mean, I've seen systems of foster care and stuff like that as well, and they're already overrun and underfunded as it is. So you have to look at would having, and this is an argument from consequence. I'm not saying this is an argument for, but like someone could, I think, reasonably argue that like if we were to have more children in this that are unwanted, would that congest the system even more, and would the existence of those children hurt the perpetuity of the children who are already awaiting resources and stuff? You know, just as you may think that having illegal immigration is a problem because it's a drain on resources, would that also be another problem of having too many unwanted children, right, in that way? So now you could say that doesn't justify the act of
I would, because I think there's several different factors when you break down the issues with the foster care system. And I don't know if you caught my episode a couple weeks ago. I actually talked about I talked about the actual problems with the foster care system we have, but like people like Christians who are double the amount of people that actually do foster care,
right?
You know, and they actually stay within the system to try to make kids' lives better even longer. What I said there is that, you know, there's a larger problem within the foster care system, because you have people that are going to other parts of the world because we have so much red tape that the government puts on us to adopt kids. Okay. Than they do when that person can go across seas and adopt a child, right? So like we as Christians, we often adopt kids from other countries, even because we have this international communal idea of taking on the poor and the weak and stuff like that. But there's a problem when we deal with a system that is kind of working against us, and a system that we can go outside of and then mess up the system that's working against us. by doing that. So there's so many different factors that are involved. But what I can circle back to when I look at it all is that, look, killing innocent human beings is wrong, regardless if a system is messed up. What I can do is say that there's a screwed up system, and then I can say it's wrong regardless of how you feel and whatever is wrong with the system at broad. And I can, without conviction, say that killing that innocent human being is wrong, regardless of the system that's screwed up. Should I sit on that? No, but I should get up and I should protest that system as well. I should be doing both.
Are you in? Is that for every? Are you a no exceptions guy, or are you like the main three?
I am I'm a very limited exceptions guy. I'm a not a rapist, but I'm a life of the mother, and that has to be proven to be factual because there's a lot of high risk pregnancies. My last 2 kids were high risk pregnancies, and they're phenomenal children, right? Yeah, I think the life of the mother being like a fallopian tube pregnancy, ectopic, as they call it scientifically, I think those are the only cause that abortion could be justified.
Dale, you got any thoughts? We've been talking for a while.
Yeah, right. Dale, you got something else?
Yeah. So I'm not a one issue voter, although I agree largely with David on abortion. It's a very important factor. But just my experience in Canada, it doesn't matter. Like any party you vote for is going to allow for abortion. So like it actually plays no role really in my voting decision because all the parties have the same position more or less. So it's not even an open question in Canada. So yeah, but even if it was, I wouldn't say I do think that other issues can come in and override that. Like if some politician has a perfect score on everything, on every other issue, which does impact life and death and the quality of life of hundreds of millions of people in America. Down in Canada, we've got about 30 million, 35 million, so it's a little smaller, but still millions of people. Oh, okay.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah, I can conceive of ways when there would be an overriding situation or something like that. But there are times when the abortion overrides stuff, right? I'm a multi-issue voter. I don't just one issue and that's it, like in a simplistic way. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
I think we've both been saying that. Me and Caleb both been saying that's important, right? Mm-hmm. I just think we vary a little bit. There are some issues that that I think that we have to draw a line in the sand, especially if we have the freedom to do so.
Gotcha.
Caleb?
I mean, drawing a line. Certain things happen. I mean, like God killed infants in the Old Testament. So I don't think it's like under no circumstances can we ever do anything that leads to killing of infants or something like that.
I'm about to mute you, Dale. You're messing up. No, just
no. I mean, look, it would have. Like it would have to be incredibly important circumstances or a combination whereby cumulatively the factors are more important.
You got to be careful there, Dale. Don't want to get Randall Rouser to come in here and yell at you.
Hey, you just because you have to deal with him doesn't mean we have to. You involved him.
What happened? Caleb's had an incident with Randall Rouser?
Oh, they both have him, and I read sometimes, Caleb. Yes. I've seen.
Do you not understand? Do you not get the reference, or I didn't know if it was kind of.
Well, I know he takes a strong view. I've had him on. I was on shows with him, multiple shows.
Yeah, we were too. Yeah.
So,
oh, nice. I didn't know that.
I know he has a very strong view against Christians like me that take a literal interpretation and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Rouser sometimes take things too far.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll put my cards on the table and say I'm very sympathetic towards his view on that, or at least I like actually Greg Boyd's view better than I think he's just a little bit more charitable than perhaps Rausers is, but I mean, but that's a whole nother situation.
That's a whole nother topic. We don't have time to.
Yeah, that would be a whole nother show for sure.
Yeah, maybe 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with that, guys. Anyways,
so this was supposed to be David Russell Unleashed. Have you been unleashed yet? Or?
I have been unleashed. I think I've made my case against some things that I disagree with. I think that Caleb has brought a lot to the conversation, and even GU, that we have to consider. And I think that overall, and I didn't get to my theological talk, which was what me and you brought up, Dale. So maybe we can do that on the next episode or something about, do more people get into heaven, or do more people have to go to hell? Is the way, the way of life view, or
the correct answer that you're looking for is that people go to hell, but then everyone goes to heaven eventually. That's
the Caleb view, guys. That's the heretic view.
It's Origin's view, David Bentley Hart's view, Thomas Talbot.
Yeah, they're wrong. It's okay. No, I mean, seriously, like, we didn't get into that, but like, I do want to discuss that with you, Dale, because I do think I did exegete it for you as you asked, and I did come to another conclusion that I think you'd be very interested in. So maybe that could be a start of a Theo Geeks episode that we can do just randomly if you'd like.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, I take the traditional view. I think it's pretty clear that the Bible says, Jesus says, why does the vast majority of humanity is hell-bound?
Well, and that's the problem. You think that Adam's sin can overcome Christ's faithfulness. So, I mean, Caleb would agree with me there.
I don't know. I guess I don't want to get too much. This would be a whole other episode, I'm sure. But
it would.
That view does just come off to me as like, I just imagine God prior, Son's creation, taking. I want to say you're not an open theist, so I guess I won't use the word wager, but looking at all the cards and saying, dang, the only way I can make this really good world is if I have and the majority of people, going to hell for all of eternity. I don't think at that point, it seems like the better option would to just be not create at all. If that's the calculus that comes with it, that's sort of my conviction. Especially, and then you get the problem, what's the proper ratio? Do you want a world, like if there was a world where there's only 2 or 3 people and they were all saved, is that a worse world than one where there's 10 billion who were damned and 3 billion who are not? And is it 70-30? Like, is it by ratio? Is it by absolute number? Is God just pulling these numbers out of thin air? Like, where are we in this? I honestly don't know of any. I still have yet to find a traditionalist who's been able to give me a solid value of this is the metric God's using without appealing to either mystery or just not, answering the question. To be honest.
Well, Caleb, my view on this is there's a qualitative and a quantity issue here, and I think that Scripture answers it, and that Christ says, "Worry about your own life," right? Where he uses in Toda Scripture, he uses examples of the gate in different contexts, and that he is the gate, and we are to strive to go towards that gate. And yes, there are some people that don't make it. I understand, but I do think there's some there are that do, and I think that the quantity is unmeasurable, and I think the other quantity is given a lake of fire, where we're given a new heaven and a new earth. So that should probably give you an idea of where I stand.
Do you take the lake of fire thing literally, by the way, or do you see
no? No. What I do is I see a metaphor that limits a lake to if you understand anything about a lake, you understand that a lake is measurable, where you understand the new heavens and the new earth as immeasurable. So I think that would tell you something about the quantity versus quantity in the lake.
Doesn't Revelation give you the dimensions of the New Jerusalem? It's this feet by this feet, or however many cubits. But
it gives you the numbers of people without measure. And then when you looked at the parallel verse to Dale's verse in Matthew 7, 13, and 14, and then you look at Luke's passage in the parallel verse in Luke. I don't have that. Let me see if I have that. Yeah, Luke 13, 29, you see Jesus kind of like not address the actual issue of quantity. And he tells people to strive and to worry about their own lives. And you see there's something there as you look at it in Toda. And when I look at it, I see that there are people relegated to the lake of fire, but I also see a lot more relegated to life. And that's where me and Dale would disagree.
I don't deny that. I just don't think the lake of fire is meant to be in perpetuity. That maybe just where you and I would have our divergences.
So I'll just I think that the mistake Caleb is making is a lot. It's the same thing the atheists always make. They always underestimate the value that is derived from being in the state of salvation, and they overestimate the disvalue, I guess, that comes about from being in hell.
Right.
And it's funny, you mentioned like you never get the quantities. Great. I never get the quantities from the skeptics. What is the value of the God-only universe, the overall total, compared to this one? Or, I mean, because I get atheists that say, look, if even one person's in hell, it's not worth it. So there's a whole spectrum of just subjective judgments. But can you quantify it? Like, how do you prove that this world has a less overall value than the God alone value? Is it just it feels that way to you? Or?
Well, I think that this world, I think this is the universalist world, right? So I think that a world where God's creation is in forever unison with him is infinitely valuable. Like I wouldn't disagree there, but if you're asking, like, assuming for the sake of argument that some kind of eternal conscious torment was true, right? Then you do get into these sort of questionable ethical scenarios. And it's difficult for me to even think of, like, even if we were to think of thought experiments, it seems like you're just playing with utilitarianism there, where you're saying how much is one life versus the other, and those kinds of those parallels, right? Like, even if it were the case where, say, you were to play a poker game with the devil and you had a 50-50 chance of winning, we'll just say, and if you win, every single war ends, every single person who's starving in the world, everyone, world hunger ends, world peace happens, all that stuff happens if you win. If you lose, then your closest family members will get sold into sexual slavery and torture for the rest of their lives, or you can refrain from playing at all. And even though you could say, look how many people are going to be affected by this good thing, and only a relatively handful of small people are going to suffer, it still seems obvious that you shouldn't take that bet, right? It's even if it was one family member, I don't think I would take that bet. So this, to me, it just seems like that's where the moral calculus is, and I think hell is infinitely worse than that situation.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here. I know Caleb's viewing here. And Caleb, if you look at my theodicy, which I'm actually writing my thesis on.
You keep hyping this up, and I've been waiting for it. It's like my miracles thing, which has been going on for years now. But
yes, you have miracles. I have theodicy. Okay,
yes, right.
Mine should be done by the end of this year. I actually have the deadline. So
how long is the paper?
The paper's got to be 120 pages at least, and I'll probably expound on it more once I'm done because I've got so much information on it. So keep it in mind. I do think there's a lot that has to do with boundaries and reality and the realness of things. But other than that, guys, I mean, we're done for the night. We got to be done for the night. We've gone on almost 3 hours. And yeah, I am. I've got other things I have to actually get done before I go to bed tonight. So I thank Caleb for jumping on, buddy. It's been so great to see you again. I love your opinions, especially when it comes to things of politics and Christ and stuff like this. This is why I picked you as a co-host and PRA. Yeah, man. I mean, dude. I mean, you're amazing, dude. And Dale, thank you for being here for the long haul. Of course, you know, me and you, like I said to anybody, if there's a person I'd run into a fire to go get, it would be you. Thanks for being here.
No problem. Yeah, always happy to join in.
So Guys, you got another episode of Cosmic Corner coming up next week. Dale, do you have anything on Real Seekers that I need to put on?
Tomorrow I have at 11 a.m. a Shroud Wars with Hugh Ferry and Jack Markwart, and we're discussing the Shroud's history from 500 to 900 AD. And yeah, we're going to be debating the theories and the evidence for that.
Nice. Do you have a few minutes to stay on after this ends, Dale? Or
yeah, of course.
I'm going to ask about that, actually, or something similar to that, but cool.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And Caleb, when is Miracles coming out?
Volume one should hopefully be done end of this year, early next year.
So you've got actually volumes now.
It was going to be one book, but the one book would have probably been 800 or 900 pages. So it's going to be probably 3 volumes now. Granted, the first one's got the longest one. I'm planning on doing Proving Prayer, which is volume 1, which will be the longest one. That's about method and case studies. Second volume was going to be Does God Heal Amputees? And then probably the title. And then third volume is going to be about modern visions and Christophanies, including Jesus, visions of Jesus, visions of Mary, saints, etc., all that stuff that's involved in healing. So that's the plan as of now to go about it. So I'm excited for that to be done and out.
Right on. Well, with that, guys, again, I want to thank everybody for being here, everybody for participating. Go ahead, Dale.
So sorry, but while Caleb's here, I'm wondering if you might want to co-host with me, because I'm doing a show on near-death experiences, but I've got 3 experts.
That works out.
Keith Augustine, because David Russell rejected me, but Keith.
Augustine agreed to do it. I thought he
agreed to do it, but we're doing it with Michael Sudduth and Stephen Bott as well. So I'll send you an email if you would like to be co-host and help me out moderating that. You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, just give me the details when it is, and I might be able to make it work with my schedule, but it really just going to depend on what time it's held and all that stuff.
Yeah,
so
we haven't set that up. It's sometime in August, so yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, guys, again, thank you for joining us. And as Tyler always says, stay safe. God bless. Stay like Christ, all that stuff. Stay like Christ, guys. Really, that's the most important. God bless.